March. We have a robust agenda this afternoon, so we're going to jump right into it. Our first presentation is about the Helping Hands Mentoring Program. Remember, January was our mentoring month, and we've been speaking a lot about mentoring programs in Wake County. One of the ways that we're actively involved is through our Helping Hands program, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that today. Dr. Chavis?
All right, good afternoon. Chair Haggerty, Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler, Board of Ed members, Dr. Taylor, good afternoon. We are happy to be with you today. Granville Johnson, excuse me, I don't want to get your name wrong. Granville Johnson, a Senior Administrator in the Office of Equity Affairs. As we continue to give a series as to our programs in the Office of Equity Affairs, we think that this is an important opportunity for us to share a premier program of Helping Hands, long-standing program with mentoring in our district. Today we'll talk about strategies and programming that help to mitigate opportunity gaps for our young people. And think about equity as an action from Policy 1150, in which we're talking about the application of an equity lens, as well as removing barriers, thinking about access to programs and opportunities for our young people, particularly those with predictive association to student outcomes based on race, ethnicity, and social economic status. So without further ado, I will pass it to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. And I don't know all the formalities, so thank you, Wake County School Board. And give me a chance to talk about something that's very meaningful and I'm passionate about. We'll go through the milestones, the program today, the significance of Worldview, which I think school districts should focus more on, program components, equity-focused practice, and our next steps. In the 87-88 school year, Dr. Bridges began the program. Doing the research and the study, he actually saw that there were these huge gaps within the community. And he began to devise ways to begin to bridge those gaps. And the program was initially designed to support African American boys from grades 3 through 8 in the district. Of course, and these are some of our milestones. I want to talk more about myself before we get started. Why this is so important to me. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in poverty. I grew up in a house where there was some emotional and physical abuse. I struggled with ADHD to this very day. I got held back in the 3rd grade and the 10th grade. I was 19 years old, almost 20, before I finished high school. I remember directly sitting in my class, I think it was probably the 4th grade. The teacher said, today we're going to learn division. The next thing I heard was, does everybody understand? I missed everything in between. My mind was always running all over the place. We had no idea what was going on back then in the 60s. Later, years later, one of my teachers saw me as an adult, and she literally said, Granville, you had us all confused. She literally said, we didn't know if you were retarded or what. They put me in special ed for about a week, realized I didn't belong there. Put me back in a regular classroom, where of course I continued to fail. So that's part of the reason that this is so important to me. Also, a changing point in my life, I read a book, and the book was titled Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. In the book, he said, the mind is like a servo mechanism. Wherever you point your mind, that's where your life will go. I began reading the book, I began following those practices, and my life began to shift. From age 13 to mid-20s, I was suicidal. I hated life. I was a failure. I was poor. I mean, I was the kind of person, I would literally walk up to McDonald's and be afraid to order from the menu. Reading that book began to shift the way I thought about myself, which changed my entire life. Helping Hands is designed to strengthen kids emotionally and socially so that they can begin to shift their lives. This program is not about fixing broken communities. It's not about fixing broken families or broken people. It's about showing kids who they really are beneath all the gunk that has been later on us by society. I'm happy to say that in the past week, I came on board in 2019. and ministering the program that we were able to bring on, and many more as a result of our leadership. I am amazing. We tell the kids that all the time. They repeat that all the time. In a world which would often tell us that we are amazing, that we are beautiful, that we are intelligent, that we are talented, that we can do things, we have got to learn to tell kids, or teach kids, positive self-talk. It makes a significant difference. This is a video from our summer champs. I don't have access to... There's one who can... A clicker. The video?
Is that a live link?
It's a video. This is our summer camp.
That's the picture
That's a picture there.
Here we go. Yeah.
Turn the volume up. Summer Champ says, language arts, STEM, and visual art, we teach kids to believe in themselves, to trust themselves, to reach out for help when needed. And those, for me, are the basics that we need to put inside of students when they begin to excel academically. One of the challenges from coast to coast, I tell people all the time, when students are struggling struggling academically, they are not opening their books, they're falling behind in classes. The thing we do is give them tutoring, we give them more homework, all the things we know are not working. Oftentimes what kids need is the capacity to begin to dream. Everyone in this room was a graduate from college. You had a dream. When kids begin to dream, they will then say, well, how did you do that? Where do I go? How do I get help? But oftentimes we're just like, give them a tutor, give them an IEP, and those things aren't necessary. But the kid who needs a tutor, the kid who says, I've been struggling with this math problem all night long, I can't figure it out, what am I doing wrong? Or the child who says, how do you roll that R in French again? How do you say it? Those children need tutors. Students who are just sort of like completely academically disengaged, don't need tutors. They need us to help them begin to dream, to believe in themselves. In the yellow column, you can see where your district stands in terms of your level of the schools that are involved in helping hands. We've got 18 schools, 24 groups. At the top, you'll see like 10 schools for elementary, 11 groups. That's because we have a male and female group at some of the schools. About 180 students total. Before COVID, there were about 300 students. We do mental orientation, in-person coaching, professional learning. We can chill out and read relevant articles. These are all ways that we support our mentoring. Bad mentoring is worse than no mentoring at all. We want to ensure that our mentors are using best practices. That requires constant research and learning. It requires us to continue to pour into them. Professional learning looks like circle training. It might look like partnering with a cast to do career training. You want to chill out and read, it's a chance for doing a break. I'll provide either a video or a book, and after break, we'll get together and do a video chat and discuss our learning. This is the big piece right here. If we can get this right, everything will shift, I believe. Everyone comes to like, all of us live a worldview. Our worldview tells us the foods that are appropriate for my community, where I would live, or where I wouldn't dare live. Who I vote for, if I vote at all. My dreams. I want to be a neuroscientist. I can only play for the NBA. The outcome from our worldview is all this. When we can begin to shift this within kids, everything changes. The worldview is shaped by our beliefs. What does social media say about me? What about these expectations? What about life experiences? What do they tell me about what's real for me? What are my chances of success? When we shift this, kids will shift themselves. Give them a more clear example. I call him Jamal. Jamal might want to play for the NBA or the NFL. He doesn't know why. He just wants to. But his worldview has been shaped in such a way that being an attorney, being a airline pilot, those things are beyond any sense of reality for him. I have literally met students who said, I want to play for the NBA when I grow up. And the saddest part about it, they weren't even on a high school basketball team. But all they had was that. Nothing else. And they're driven by these beliefs and this perception you aren't even aware of. The way we all are. We're all driven to certain way we dress. No one in here would probably wear a bathing suit to a funeral or to a wedding because it's not a part of the way you see the world is organized. You wouldn't wear a prom dress or a tuxedo to a beach because your worldview says that's inappropriate. It functions like a guidance system. Everything. So what our goal is in helping hands is, I might get emotional as I talk through this. Just controlling bear with me. Summer camp is our summer camp. Have a little video of it. It's a week-long camp, and we're really gracious and thankful to all the elementary schools we've been able to host it year after year. African American read-in. We have began organizing people in central office to go out to the various schools in need. to provide support for students. They love it when you all come out there. So next year, please, our annual student art event, which has got nothing to do with art at all. That was just my little way of getting families to come together in one place, have a meal together with their kids, and helping hand staff, and celebrate their kids. Now, we have to do art projects. But the focal point really is student leadership. Students actually get up and they do speeches, they talk. Parents get a chance to connect with school district personnel. And in one of our surveys, the parents, and yes, you see a little later on, the parents say that is one of the best ways to get them connected with the school. Coming to celebrate their kids. Our weekly group meeting is about an hour and a half, where students learn, again, to believe in themselves. And I tell the mentors all the time, please do not focus on homework. I mean, who wants to go to school after school? Make it fun and engaging, bridge building, and pushing them beyond their comfort zone. Field trips. We send high school students out of state every year so they get a chance to actually begin to other parts of the country. Engage in public speaking. And learn about this great country. I mean, North Carolina is wonderful. I'm from California, like I said, but I love the state. And by the way, I actually moved here because I worked at a hospital for about 20 years. I hated my job. I became sort of like a junior chaplain. I said, why not go to divinity school? People are already asking me to pray at the hospital and that stuff. I moved here to go to divinity school. Afterwards, guess what my ministry looks like? This is it. And that's why I get so choked about it, because this is like my purpose. Leaders of Readers, we're just kicking that off with Norfolk High School starting on the 18th. What's going to happen is we're going to have high school students going virtually to read to classes of elementary school students. That will give the high school students a chance to exercise leadership. We will lead the students through positive self-talk, all virtually. The younger students will get to see their future selves. They'll get to see high school students who are academically engaged. They'll get to see them as role models. My Young Men's Summit is a chance for young men to get together and talk about issues that are important to them. In a very safe space. And the Frederick Douglass Black History Knowledge Board just had that last week. Who has Heritage High School? Yours? Well, when you go over there, you see a big, beautiful trophy that the boys from Heritage High School won. It's going to be in the display case. And this next screen leads directly to the importance of studying this material. Now, I call this Makai's story. His older brother, Kieran, was actually my mentee in the district. Makai wasn't old enough to have a mentor yet, so what I do? Brought him along with us every week. Here we go. When Makai hit the 4th grade, he was old enough to have a mentor. But the school social worker in another district said, Makai would be a waste of a mentor. He was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD. Well, I went to the receptionist. She said, Makai, he's a runner. I didn't see any of that. I saw a little black boy who wanted to be loved and wanted to enjoy life. That's Makai. He's finishing his first year of college. After leaving that elementary school, he went to the middle school next door, right next door. So you know, all the negative stuff went right along with him. He didn't know that. He hit the 6th grade, and Makai hit the honor roll and stayed there through high school graduation. Makai turned down 4 universities in North Carolina. when he was a kid, I would always show them African Americans. People that never even heard of. And I think I was driving down Hillsborough one day and I said, hey, why do I always show you guys this? My guy said, so that we can know that black people are smart too. A fourth grader understands that he's already been counted out as being stupid. He understands that the world around him doesn't expect anything out of him. He understands that it's necessary to see this so that he can see his future self. That wasn't the only impact for him, I'm sure. I can't take credit for it. But it certainly impacted his vision and his hopes, despite what the school said. Despite even that stuff. And what, some of my friends, Captain Ed Getfit, they said, we'll get Makai into the program. Because all he got to do, once he's in the program, he's there for good. They got him in. After about a year, they said, okay, it's going to be a rematch now. He'll remain in the program the entire time, got a chance to go to all the camps and things. I think that shaped the way kids see themselves. I start crying again. I mean, but he's wonderful. He's wonderful. No, let me tell you. So I told my guy, I take him to Walmart and bought him a bunch of stuff for his dorm and whatnot and stuff. I said, if you ever need me, call me. He called me. Good afternoon, you. Hey, Mr. Johnson. I'm like, okay, you must need something, right? He said, was that thank you? You don't want anything else but say thank you. I didn't do anything but believe in him and tell him what he could be. The talent was there. The intelligence was there. The passion was there. He had a few challenges. But he overcame them. It was all there. And all I want to say is thank you. Black history is not about revolutionary concepts, or taking the country. It's simply giving kids a chance to say, this is who you can be. When we change your world, or help you change the world. When we tell you, you can be a nuclear physicist, you can be a math teacher, you can be whatever, that comes out of their lives. In Wake County schools, we have the capacity to do that. From ethics books practices to a capacity. So we've taken girls, I think, so Dr. Jeannie Perry Campbell here, she came on board and I said, right in her lap. She organized an entire HBU STEM tour for the girls. It's an amazing thing at 3 universities. In the science lab, everywhere. And what I think in the city state, they actually got to meet the chancellor, who was female, and to sit and talk to her entire cabinet. How shaping is that for young ladies? It says 51.7% of women interested in college and college. That seems like a lot. Except when you consider that Helping Hands has students who might be struggling with mathematics. And we have students who are in their freshman and sophomore year in calculus classes. Those students, no matter what we do, they want to increase their interest in going to college. They're going anyway. But it might build a sense of future possibility. It might have to feel more connected to the school. There are other advantages for those students. Creating brave spaces. I was at a board meeting and one of the board members said, I want to see more people get involved with voting. Well, guess what? We're teaching kids to become more civically engaged. Don't tell them how to vote for, but become civically engaged. And this right here kills me every time. Almost 40% of the boys said they want Wake County schools to push them even harder. That isn't an area that we hear. Or at least that I don't hear. They said, we want more opportunity to push beyond our comfort zone. We want you to hold our nose to the line. We're doing it in a way that values us. We're doing it in a way that makes us feel like we're part of the community. We belong. And again, I love this picture right here. The students, whether they're in elementary, middle, or high school, they said these opportunities like this, when in your regular classrooms, they feel more confident presenting in front of the class because they actually practiced it, and they did it in front of an audience that's going to class. One of the things we do, we call it boy praise and girl praise. If you get up there and you fumble through your entire presentation, guess what? Everyone goes wild because we really praise the effort more than the outcome. Sure, A's are great. People with guts, those are the ones who never actually win one day. So what happens is, they say, it builds confidence in us. Partnering with family and caregivers. So this is our last year's dinner. I mean, again, thanks to the whole OEA team, they had candles in the center of the table. They had flowers. They got tablecloths. And the City of Raleigh Museum gave us a space for free. And it was just wonderful. The families came, the kids presented, the art was over in this section of the room, and the families all left feeling like Wake County cares. So we know we do care. We do. One of my favorite pictures here. These boys are excited to read I Am Every Good Thing. This last frame says, I am worthy of love. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of love. And what was happening before, they were sitting in their seats. They were taking turns to read out loud. They got this last page. They said, let's read it together. They jumped up. They said, we are worthy of love. And they are worthy of love. And so is everyone in this room. So are all of our kids in the district. Reggie story. This is group in Los Angeles, my friend Reggie group in Compton. Reggie is way smarter than me. I'm not saying that to be like, he's like, man, remember back in 1972? I'm like, what? Unfortunately, Reggie got on drugs. He moved from LA to Philadelphia in an attempt to sort of get clean. Moved from Philadelphia to DC. Got himself together. He's been working for the government now for clearly over 20 years. He's doing extremely well, extremely bright. He said, Grant, I know what I wanted to do when I was in middle school. All he wanted to do was go in a barber shop. That was it. He didn't have anybody to show him how to get from his dream to the reality. If somebody had ever said, Reggie, this is all you have to do, you've an entire life of it. So with Helping Hands and Stars, it's important for us to actually connect students with people they can actually talk to. Realize you can vote, but you can also go to Capitol Hill and talk to people. Service learning. This is Tyson. He was last year's Mentor of the Year. He's engaged with the student directly again. It's bridging that connection. Here is at a family engagement night. 4 boys from Wake Forest middle school. They're standing up, presenting in front of 100 people. I said, don't memorize that. Read it. I had a script out, the names, little picture, little pause, literally read it. And then when the parents got done, sorry parents, they were like, I said, no. I said, if those boys had thrown the winning touchdown, we would tear this building down. Get up. You got to begin changing culture. We have got to begin, and the parents got them again screaming for the boys. I know I'm a little different, but she's going, I know how different you are. Centering student voices. So we were in DC at the Thurgood Marshall Center. And I showed a video called Life's Voice. It's a 19-minute short film that talks about this young man who goes from being this little bitter, angry, everybody person to this loving young man who respects everybody. It's done extremely well, called Life's Voice. So we watched the film, had a group discussion, then the boys were tasked with breaking into small groups and discussing, coming up with an idea about a film they thought would be worthy of creating. So we gave the boys an opportunity to think critically, to do some team building, some public presentation, and again to know they're boys and men. We can. And 80% were like, this is like helping me think more clearly about where I want to go, what I want to do. And I'm sure some of you might remember these photos from the Black History celebration on board hospitals. And so we're at the end of the presentation. And any questions regarding anything else?
I thought we should get your reference.
Let me actually say this. Let me give you all a round of applause because you guys are having fun with this. You make this possible. I can't do any of this. This is really a team effort. It really is. And the boys were in the Renewal House office building. Because again, for me, it can't be about just touring the place. You got to be in the space. You got to feel it. You got to know that you belong in it. When I talked to Bardia, who was Congressional aide, I said, regardless of what they ask you, turn it back around and say you're important and your vote matters.
Good answer.
All right. Mr. Johnson, just a huge thank you. You know, this is a presentation I've been working for some time to share with you all. And I hope now that you've seen it, maybe you understand why. You know, this is a program I think a lot of us maybe knew just a little bit about, and I don't know if any of us knew all of this that we learned today. Yeah, it is transformative, and it's one of the things that a lot of people in the community don't know a lot about, but it really is that good work that we do so that all students will be prepared to succeed in life. All students will have that sense of, you know, support, right? That knowledge that people believe in them, that they have that self-worth and value, that creates confidence and motivation, and that creates achievement. And I know this is just one success story. I know you have many, many more. And I just hope we'll continue to support and endorse this work. This is one of the programs that when we talk about things we do maybe outside of the classroom to support students in the classroom, this, I think, gives you a real person, a real name to associate with it. So if there are no questions, we'll move on. But thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Oh, Ms. Mahaffey.
I just had one, and that is, if someone is interested in mentoring a child, who do they get in touch with in order to take the training?
So we only do group mentoring.
Okay.
So they would need to contact the school first. If the principal's on board, that's it to go.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Question.
Oh, Mr. Hershey.
Are there any barriers to expanding this to other schools? Like you had a list of schools that were up there. I mean, a list of the
Yeah,
number
we
of
actually have
schools.
schools now who would like to be in, but we can't take them in. Because one of the things that we do, we provide mentors, school teachers, a small stipend for staying after school every week, preparing lesson plans for like students. It's very small. The lead mentor gets $1,100 for the entire academic year. $550 per semester. That's less than, that's probably close to minimum wage. The assistant mentor, who's also a school teacher, gets $700 for the entire school year, $350 per semester. And some of them take the money and actually put it back into the kids.
Yeah.
Because when that begins to, when we get more mentors, we need more funding for that, for them. That's one of the barriers of that. Funding is limited. And also, I happen to be helping hand. So my capacity is limited.
Good answer. It's one person.
All right, any other questions? Just said
How
members of
often
that
can we have
trust
it
chair.
back?
Well, this is actually a question, what Ms. Johnson-Hostler and I have talked about. I think we need to just talk to more people about these programs, put them out there, ask questions, praise the good work, ask questions if there's things that we're not clear on or don't understand, and make sure everyone knows about it. So I'm in favor of bringing this back, whether it's Helping Hands or similar programs throughout the year, just to help us see it, be able to answer questions about it that people have, and to ask our own questions. All right. Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
I actually thought Mr. Hershey was going to ask this because he's usually on brand. And this is not actually a question for you, but probably for Dr. Chavis or Dr. Robinson. So when I first came on the board in 2013, several of my elementary schools had this, which is why I was extremely familiar with it. We also had some grant funding at that time. Is this something that we've attempted to apply for grants to expand now that we're post-COVID, now that we're back in person and fully up and running?
Superintendent pointed to me, so
I saw it. You could just point it back and be like, your vote matters. As a board member, you get to decide.
Absolutely. So just give everybody a heads up. We have been in conversation about how do we expand the program. What does it look like? So in conversation with Cindy, we can look into that. But in talking with Dr. Chavis as well, we talked about seeing what kind of proposals we can put forward. Because right now, although Granville does a phenomenal job, he is a single point of failure. So if he was to transition or to do something else, we would be caught in a situation where we can't continue the program in its current capacity. So we are looking at seeing what we can do to make sure that we continue to positively impact all students.
Can we just positively change it to single point of success?
Single point of success.
Thank you.
Single point
I know
of
we both
success.
like
We'll be more successful.
We actually asked that, so that's why I thought you were going to ask the final.
All right. Everyone, Ms. Caulfield?
Yeah, I was just wondering if because I know you mentioned STARS was a like a girls' version of Helping Hands, right? Do they have any intention if they expand it, to more schools, obviously, but what about high school?
We've got 3 high schools right now.
So you do have the 3 high
Millbrook,
schools?
South
Okay.
Garner, and Heritage. And we've got stars and Helping Hands in both.
Okay. So your focus that, in the beginning it said focus grade 3rd through 8th. I guess that's just the particular programs that you had there?
When Dr. Bridges created the program, that was the focus.
Okay.
And since coming here from another district, we had high school support. It doesn't make sense. That might have been the best word. We need to go beyond.
Right, proactive and,
Right.
current,
I'm
right.
sure the rationale back then was let's get it started.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rice?
So my question is, how do you integrate this program within the other areas within the district? Like, because you're impacting on student achievement, you're impacting in some of the same areas that we're doing as a district, how do we collaborate within the district to support this with possible dollars that might be there that reflects with what's going on with Helping Hands? Like, is there any collaboration that happens within the district to help with these same impacts?
One of the things I do is, like the art teacher is a district employee. The ELA teacher was a district employee. So we use as many school resources as we can. Does that answer your question? I mean, we're not collaborating like cross-departmentally, if that's what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's actually where I was going to see where we crossing interdepartmentally, that where it actually, there may be some gaps in other departments where there might be funding and then Helping Hands might actually meet that particular gap possibly in funding. I don't know. So I'm just asking, because this is what I do know. What I do know is that Wake has amazing resources, and sometimes we just need our resources to talk to each other within our district. And so that's why I was asking what cross-departmental collaboration is actually happening that might can help with expanding what we're doing in that area.
So, Ms. Rice, I'll answer that question. I don't know what Mr.
Thank you,
Johnson
Dr.
may add. But that is actually one of the things that I think we've all talked about is how do we look at all the resources that we have and be able to catalog and manage those in a way that addresses all of the issues and problems that we have. I think the first thing that I noticed, we were in Wendell, Mrs. Caulfield, and I saw the tremendous amount of community resources that are out there, but they may not necessarily have access to the school. So it is about how we look at those resources and better coordinate with what they are and how we deploy those. The other part is about how departments can have conversations about how we can support programs such as this. And when we think about it from a financial perspective, there are so many different programs that we have that would find components within their program to dedicate a small amount of funding towards a specific program. And when you look at that collectively across programs, you can do things to expand it. I know when we begin to look at how we expand our work with business and community partners, then one of those things I want to make sure that we do is have programs like this so that we say this is a part of our effort of working with the business community, and they begin to provide resources to the district. These are the kinds of programs that we can support. So it really is about making sure there's an opportunity to have conversations. If the opportunity is not even there, then there's no chance to even talk about it. So,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And as what Dr. Taylor is saying, in another district, when I worked with the mentoring program, I was brought into the middle school because the white principal said, I've got 12 black boys in the entire 7th grade. She said they need to see each other, they need support, they need a sense of camaraderie. So she brought me in to do a daily leadership class, an elective pass-fail. At the end of the semester, a professor from NC State did the research, and the boys had fewer depressive symptoms. They felt more global self-esteem. Every area began to rise. And I'm not even a teacher. But I can just coach kids. So that's something we did over in another district. That might be considered sort of like cross-departmental.
Okay. All right. And this is something that, I mean, we will continue to talk about, and I think we'll see, especially with our strategic plan, ways that we're taking this work and really managing it across different platforms, different departments and divisions, all with the same goal in mind. So, all right. Is that another question? All right. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. The next item on our agenda is we're going to talk about the public engagement plan, specifically for the upcoming 25-26 enrollment plan. So this is not our district's engagement plan, but this is specifically what we do every year when we go out to talk to families about potential changes that will come to student assignment areas as we open up new schools in the district or work to address growth. So we have our wonderful student assignment team here. I'm not sure which one of you is driving. Ms. Pulley? All right. Jump on in whenever you're ready.
A very hard act to follow, so I hope it could be equally as engaging. As Mr. Haggerty mentioned, we are here to give you this is a new checkpoint for us. We have not typically come to you this early in the process, but we are learning lessons along the way and thought it would be really helpful for us to talk with you today about what we're doing differently as we enter into the 25-26 enrollment plan process based on feedback we've heard over the last couple of years. So we're here to talk to you about that feedback. We're here to talk to you about some of the general, I'm not going to give you concrete dates for everything, but we'll give you the general timeline and sequencing of our public engagement plan this year, as well as to have an opportunity to solicit feedback and thoughts from you to help us continue to shape this plan. As Mr. Haggerty mentioned, it's for the 25-26 enrollment plan, which sounds very far away for most people in this room, but for me, it's tomorrow. So it's important that we go ahead and engage this conversation. So we're going to start by going over some lessons that we've learned from our previous efforts, and then spend more time talking about our response to that feedback. specifically how we're incorporating suggestions from our community into our process to make it even better. We'll spend a little time giving a brief background of how the process works, because we've heard a lot of feedback about needing some clarity around that. And then I'll dive into the actual events that we have planned for the year. So it's pretty short and sweet. What we've heard from our families and our community members really falls into these 3 buckets. They would truly like a better understanding of the assignment planning process. We heard that from our families, our communities, from our board members. During all of our public engagement last year, we heard it from our leadership team. We heard it from civil leaders in our municipalities and towns and cities that are partner with us. So we want to do a better job of shaping that story and making that information more accessible to families and community members. Also, they want to have a better understanding of how their feedback impacts the planning process. And I'll get to some specifics on how we're responding to that, but that really is crucial. When I give feedback to the district, how is that incorporated into the planning process? And as always, more and different and easier ways to engage in the process. And we're hoping that we're notching some of those off and ticking those off the list. So for those first 2 elements, helping families and community members to better understand the assignment planning process, as well as how their feedback impacts the process, those 2 core areas, here are the new things we're doing. There's a lot we're continuing, and I'll make sure to highlight those, but here are some new things. We have a new website, and if you know me, I always have a favorite website. This time of year, I have a new one. We've created a new page that lets people fall to it and understand the assignment planning process. And what's great about hosting it on our webpage is that it's completely translatable into all the languages that our website serves. In addition, we can outlink to any of our partner pages within the district. For example, capital improvement is not really my shop, but it's part of our process, so we can cross-link to all of those resources in a one-stop shop for families. In addition, we heard a lot of feedback about how do we get engaged. We feel like we're finding out too late, so we have a whole new section that's going to really outline where and when people can plug in. There are a lot of thought exchanges that are already live and posted here. In addition, we're going to allow families to be able to sign up to participate in focus groups regardless of if they're particularly impacted. And so we'll get into some of those too. Our community messages, it's a strong system that we have here in the district. We're going to leverage it a little bit more frequently this year than we have in years past to just continue reminding families, hey, if you haven't checked, might be time to go look. If you haven't participated, might be time to check out if you're available for one of our events. And then leveraging our community partners, part and parcel to what was told to you just moments ago. We need to engage all of our families at every level. And so every community partner that we can find, we will partner with to share information to increase our outreach. Some simple things we did last year was to start with our principals and the SELT group, the Community Equity Leadership Team, I think I said that right. And that we saw upticks immediately after partnering with both of those groups in terms of year-over-year participation. So we're going to continue to push those levers that are working and find more. When we talk about that third bullet about more and different opportunities, some new things. Again, we're going to expand the offering for focus groups to more families. So anybody who wants to volunteer to participate will have the ability to register to do so, and we'll invite them. I pause for a moment and just say, keep in mind focus groups are intended to be small. So if I have 1,000 people volunteering, I can only take about 12 at a time, so not everybody will be selected if we have an overwhelming support or response to the call for the focus groups. The expanded asynchronous offerings. I really want to highlight this, and what's not captured here poignantly is not only are we trying to make sure that we have more opportunities for families to participate in activities at their own pace. We'll have some live and in-person sessions, we'll have some asynchronous or virtual sessions, and we're also trying to make some what I call collateral materials that are videos that families can watch on their own if they can't go to either. So we're trying to offer as much as we can for people to learn it and plug in. More importantly, we're expanding our efforts to engage in that multilingual space. So while I mentioned our website can be translated into any language, our thought exchange tool that we use can as well. We're now starting to create any videos that we're building in-house. We're going to narrate them in both English and in Spanish, so families can listen to them in either language and not just look for subtitles. We're also making sure that any of our print materials that go to principals, if they're going to maybe put it in a backpack or make it available to families through their principal messages, are also pre-translated and in both languages. We're working with our communications department to determine if there's another language that we need to add to our list of pre-translated materials, and as we learn more about that, we will always partner with our communications department to do so. The new event at the bottom is sort of a new old event. It's been a while since we've had a face-to-face, in-person event in the fall, once the draft has been released, but we heard very clearly from our board that there was interest in that, and we heard very clearly from our families there's interest in that. So we will be hosting an in-person event in September, date to be determined. We're still trying to get our site location, but it will be an open house format. The goal here is, in a lot of the sessions I attend with families this time of year, they're asking some very simple questions. What's the school mascot for the new school? Will this new school have before and after school care? If I get reassigned, what happens to my bus route? Some very practical, poignant questions that I'm not always in a position to be able to answer in detail for families, but we're going to pull together an entire group from across the district, cross-functional, cross-departmental, so that families can stop in and ask those questions, as well as having access to the assignment team to understand how any assignment recommendations might particularly impact their families. So again, more to come on that, but it'll be in September during a non-board week so that you all can join us if you'd like. And it'll be set up more like an open house format with lots of stations so families can get lots of information and ask any questions that they have. As we go through this year's public engagement plan, here's my new favorite website, and I'll share this with everybody on regular occasions, but this is our new landing page for assignment planning. And you'll see that this is nestled in our student assignment section. You might be used to the Future Schools site. It is still there, but it's now nested under this because Future Schools really only talk about our new schools. We also have other assignment changes that are made for other reasons, and we wanted to make sure we had an all-inclusive spot for families to come and learn about all that is the assignment planning process. It went live softly on Friday, so please explore, families. But before we get into the specific events, I did want to start this new process. Let's make sure we understand where the annual enrollment plan falls in the assignment planning process. It's actually a step, and it's not the last step. So before we get to bringing any recommendations to you, we start with the annual enrollment forecast. For those of you on the facilities committee, you may recall you recently received that forecast. That sort of drives a lot of the decision making as we go into the annual portion of the enrollment plan. It is a multi-year process. So that forecast has been released. We're using that information to figure out what that's going to look like for our projected crowding for next year. So in an upcoming facilities committee meeting, you'll get a report on that. You've already capped schools, but candidly, that's the last step in the assignment planning process. And then we sort of restart the process here. Our capital improvement plan, I know we'll go through a couple of updates and you'll get some information about that in the coming months, and that will also drive any decisions that we need to make for 25-26. And then, of course, we do a touch point with you in May where we address any other goals beyond the opening of new schools that might need to be dealt with as we're looking at the next enrollment plan. So just a visual to remind everybody what the forecast is. The full presentation for the forecast is in the board materials from that facilities committee meeting, but this is just a quick screenshot. As a reminder, it's updated every year. So what you're seeing on this screen is just that quick view of, well, in 2021, it looked like we'd have this type of a growth curve. In 2022, based on updated information, it looked like maybe a little bit more modest growth curve. And now that we have even more updated information, it's a little bit more accelerated growth curve. So it's important for us to continue to look at this not only from an annual enrollment perspective, but also from our long-term planning with our capital improvement plan, site selections, all of that. You'll get your update on the crowding at a future committee meeting, so I have nothing to share yet. And then just as a friendly reminder, in February, you did approve updates to the cap list. As a reminder, we did take 3 schools off, and we didn't add any. Progress. I'm so happy. We'll just take a moment for that. As a reminder, we do have 1 middle school and 1 high school that, in addition to being capped, also have a feeder pattern cap. We have updated the language on our website to help families better understand what that means, literally just within the last 2 weeks. So it is slightly different. They're really capped. As far as the capital improvement plan goes, this is what you saw in the fall, so this has not changed in my slide decks because I know you haven't yet had conversations about any adjustments to this, but right now, you've approved an assignment area for Woods Creek, which is scheduled to open in July, and then the circle in blue are the group that we're currently planning to bring you recommendations for the 25-26 school year. Those that are outside of this list, we're considering, we're actually going to start some public engagement for Parkside Middle, but we won't bring you any recommendations this fall. Just as a physical reminder of where they're located, Woods Creek is the one that's highlighted here. In the blue circles, you're seeing those new schools that are currently projected to open in 25, 26. I'm always reminded to remind everybody about the asterisks on these slides. Due to market volatility, scope and design changes, schedules changes, all kinds of things can adjust some of these schedules, but for right now, this is what we're projected to work toward. And then the circles that you see here are those that are in the out years, so we'll be considering those for future enrollment plans, but they are in our mind as we're thinking about enrollment recommendations for 25, 26. We'll come back to you in May and have a more detailed conversation about, in addition to opening of schools, what else should we be considering in our enrollment plan? I can give you a brief update on some of the public engagement to date at that point in time, but I'll come to you later in the summer with a full update. So what are we doing? We're repeating or reusing a particular process that we started last year, which was to go out this time of year to different school sites that are somewhat proximate to where the future schools are located, and to talk with some targeted groups of families about what's important for your community, for us as a district to understand as we're developing recommendations for these new schools that are coming online. So I do always note we have a very limited invitation pool for these events because we are using school sites with media centers with 75 or so seat capacities. So if a family really, really wants to participate but doesn't get that invitation, we've added a new opportunity in May where they can attend virtually and still have the same experience. So we have listened to feedback and expanded that offering. What else is new is that new website. As I mentioned, I'm going to kind of highlight these. This just ties back to that first slide about how we're responding to the feedback, or that earlier slide, excuse me. So by having that updated assignment planning website and also clearly outlining what those new ways to plug in are and having them out a little bit earlier so more families can engage in the process. I mentioned the impact areas. You'll have seen these in prior presentations, and there are also some on our websites. The map on the right represents what we kind of thought was our impact area for the last year's sessions, and based on feedback, they changed. So this year, you'll notice that the one on the left is a little bit smaller. Also, it has some modernizations to it, always trying to strive for a better looking map. So what you're going to see for all of our areas is that the impact areas for the 2024 conversations are slightly different from those that we used last year when we had the first round of conversations with these communities. And again, that's largely responding to the feedback that we've received along the way about what's important and what should or shouldn't be considered. I also will pause here and say, as a reminder, impact areas are not recommended assignment areas. They are not recommended assignment areas. Impact areas are much larger than what will be the ultimate assignment area. However, they allow for a larger community conversation with all the stakeholders. It is possible that a family member might not be reassigned, but their current school could have a lower enrollment as a result of the changes that are recommended. Maybe their favorite teacher will go to the new school. There could be small impacts for a family that families aren't thinking about, and so we want to make sure we have a broad conversation with a broad base of groups, or broad base of families from the communities that might be impacted. So again, not an assignment area map. When we have the sessions, we'll take an opportunity to go over the assignment plan process. Every year we get a lot of, last year we got a lot of positive feedback about being able to have those kinds of conversations. We'll also have very targeted discussions about what's happening in that particular community and what we're seeing in terms of the forecast for that community. But above and beyond, the most important feature is the small group conversations and whole group conversations we have where the families are helping us to understand what's important in their community and ask and answer any questions that they might have. The 2 virtual sessions, this is new. So in response to, but I know my student won't be reassigned because they're too old or too young to be impacted by this plan, but I live here. I kind of want to know what's happening, or I'm just really interested in how things might impact my area over time. We've added these 2 new sessions. I can confirm the dates are actually May 8th and May 9th. So we'll put specific information about linking to those and registering for those on our website. We'll have specific thought exchanges for this. We'll have a new website information specific for these sessions. And without specifically going into the new school considerations, we'll have the same basic format and conversation just in a virtual setting. As always, once we get to this point in the process, there's going to be some lingering questions, some topics that come up that require a little bit deeper exploration, or honestly, sometimes we're surprised by topics that don't get brought up by parents, that as a district, we thought they would. So in any of those areas, we're going to conduct our focus groups. We're partnering with our data research and accountability department to set those up. They've been amazing partners for the last 2 years as we've done these. The new part is that on the assignment planning website, there is a form where anybody in the district could register to participate and volunteer to participate in these versus just those that are being invited to the smaller sessions. So we've expanded that off. Oh, and while we're there, in addition, I didn't mention on the previous slide, but for both the in-person sessions and for the focus groups, we're also asking families if they need translation services support to be able to participate so that we can be prepared for them all. All right, so then after that, we'll come to you in May, like I mentioned in June. We added that last year to the calendar. I thought was very successful to be able to give you a full deep dive into what we learned from our community engagement so far, our public engagement to that point. Then we will come to you in September. You'll notice some change in terms here. So historically, we've used the terms draft 1, draft 2, and that sends a particular message that there's an expectation that there will be regular changes to the plan between the drafts. And what we wanted to do was to clarify, based on feedback from families, why are you calling it draft 1 and draft 2 if there's not a significant number of changes, or in some cases, any changes between the drafts? So we thought it would be easier if we were more clear about that and set the expectations clearly here at the front end. In September, we'll bring to you staff's initial draft of recommendations based on all the feedback received over the last couple of years, because again, we've been out into these communities last year and are going again this year, for the new schools in particular. In addition, any information you've given us in May when we do that checkpoint and figure out what we want to include as other goals for the enrollment plan. We'll have a series of virtual information sessions to help families at their pace be able to participate and ask questions and understand how the plan impacts their area. We do regionalize those, just as a reminder, so that it's very focused on a particular set of recommendations. And again, we're adding in that in-person open house event that'll happen in September where families can come and talk with all of us and explore any questions that they might have. So that when we get to the October-November timeframe, that midpoint check-in in the process, rather than calling it a particular numbered draft, it will be the review of the feedback received so far. If there are adjustments that need to be made, they'll be incorporated in that October presentation. So there is always an opportunity for things to change, but we just wanted to make sure that there's not an expectation that things will change. The expectation is that we're hearing the feedback, we're using that to shape our next steps. Then you'll have your public hearing or hearings depending on the pleasure of the board, and we'll prepare a final draft. As a reminder, we did up this schedule. It used to be in December that we would bring you the final draft. We had a lot of success doing it in November because that way families could get their results before the winter break. We could get stability transfers recorded and approved before the winter break, and families could go into their winter breaks. I'm not going to say stress-free because that's an unfair statement, but fully aware of the impacts of the plan versus having to hold their breath over the holiday break and hear final decisions in January. And we've received a lot of positive feedback from staff, principals, and of course our families on being able to have that information as early as possible. So we would recommend continuing with that cycle. So at this point, my favorite website, everybody can go visit it. And we would just open the floor to any questions, feedback, comments, suggestions, opportunities for improvement. We're very early in the process, so there's still a lot that could be flexed and adjusted.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pulliam. And let me just compliment you. I can see a lot of changes in the process designed around feedback that you've gotten. It sounds like you've really listened to a lot of the feedback that came in and put a lot of work into this, so we appreciate that. Now, board members, it's not completely fair because Ms. Rice just joined us, but for the rest of you, you've been through a reassignment process now. You've seen the large number of engagement that goes into it. This is a slightly different system, but I think a lot of these are great changes. Do you have any questions or comments or feedback for the staff? Ms. Rice?
Thank you so much for sharing this. I enjoyed looking through the presentation and going to the website prior to today. But I got a feedback yesterday at Board Member Edmonds' BAC. And one of the things I think that was said that you might find very helpful is that when you're doing your community engagement, what they found is families that while the process is is a bit challenging because change is always difficult. They found that if you could possibly find families that did do a change and how successful that it has been. And so I just thought maybe you would like to know, just look at it from a different perspective of how we can, I don't want to say change the narrative, but at least show the success rate of what it can look like, even when we do have to experience change that's uncomfortable. And so I wanted to make sure that I shared that feedback with you today from a family that shared that. And so just in your process of community engagement, possibly maybe a short couple of videos or some anecdotal situations where people were saying, hey, I didn't like the change or want the change, but it really worked out pretty successfully for my family in the end. So I think that if we sometimes can find ways to help us with change. You know, change is never easy for any of us, right? I don't always embrace change, but what I did find is that as my schedule increased being on this board, I still enjoy the change. So change can still be good.
Thank you.
Well, I think we'll have a lot more enjoyment coming up. All right, thank you, Ms. West. Dr. Ray.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And just for you all to know, our BAC meeting last week was I thought it was very productive. The active discussion among the people talking about it. I invited them to come and speak about the whole process, kind of similar to today's presentation. And there was a lot of good ideas. I mean, I think, kind of like grassroots ideas where parents were actually, there's one parent that actually came up with an idea of a website that helped to kind of clarify issues for others, new people coming into the district, so that there's not that kind of misinformation that's out there. So I think that was very good to have, and the website changes that you guys are implementing, I think it will be helpful. It'll be good to kind of get that into the hands of the parents, because that way they can actually have that tool to give that into the new folks coming into the city.
Great, thank you. Ms. Mahaffey.
I just want to echo thank you. This is hard. This work is hard. Anybody who's been through the transfer process or has had their kid reassigned knows that feeling, and you feel very alone and isolated and unheard. And so to see the iterations that have happened over my 8 years on this board, and to see the outreach that I know was seen in Glenn's head once upon a time, and certainly found the right person to implement it and grow it and put your own spin and understanding of this process. It is just really a huge difference of asking for input on the front end. The process will still not be great for families because change is hard. And I know when I had thought I had to transfer, I joked that if Future Me came down and said it would be okay, at the time me would probably have had some choice words. But at the same time, thank you for doing this. I appreciate we've seen every assignment plan, we've seen improvements and different iterations of how to make this better and easier on families. And I think this is just a prime example of that work. So thank you, and thank you, Chief Ellis, for being the boss that lets us do that.
And thank you. I mean, one of the great things in the last several years that we've been able to do is really educate parents about where do we get the data from, why are we making these changes, so that they can help become advocates out in the public as to why we have to pull this lever with regards to reassignment. So I think Susan's done a tremendous job in really engaging a lot of families, a lot more than we've done in the past, in a lot of different ways too. Taking your feedback and really getting at the voices that we haven't heard, really trying to bring those voices to the table. So just thank you for that direction, and thank you to Susan for everything that she's done.
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson Hostler.
Thank you. Again, I echo the sentiments to the major growth and change. However, they will not be surprised. One of the things you've done individually that I think is important collectively in my very, very long experience here is actually explaining it to the municipalities. Because essentially, it doesn't matter how much you explain it to parents. I say this all the time. We all love it when it's not us. Even when we watch a video, it will not change the fact that it's my child. And so, I mean, because my job is to be the reality check here. All those things are great and wonderful, but the truth is the moment that it is you having to move your kid, the reality of anything else you said does not matter anymore, and it feels personal, and it is, because it's their kiddo. And when we can't give them the response, the other elected officials are the people that they go to. And my experience has been, again, one-on-one, Mr. always responds, calls them back, gives them the details. But I also believe that that should be built into our system because we have enough experience now to know that they are going to do that, right? It's not a one-off to District 2. This is truly what people are going to do across the district. So that's the piece that I still think is just invaluable, is that whoever they go to in Wake County will be able to, one, answer some very basic questions, but two, also refer them back to you all, rather than trying to circle to come up with an answer that truly isn't accurate to the district.
And I appreciate that, because a couple of strides we've made is I'm actually plugged in with the Wake County Planners group, so I can now start to ask, hey, would it be okay if I took 5 minutes during the next meeting to share with all of your planners, who then report back to your mayors, and right, as a step, as an inward that way. And then also, we heard the call last year about having ready-made resources. And that was really kind of what went to the website, because that way it's always there. No one has to have a card, no one has to have a flyer, no one has to have a special unique code or access. It's there, it's live, and we can update it as new questions come in that require further explanation. So hopefully that will be that toolkit when people are looking on their own, but yet we are trying to find a way to be partners with them as well.
And it's a great first step, but as an elected official, they're not going to their planner. I mean, that's just the reality, right? They are literally going to call the person that they vote for.
We've got to do the messages like this thing. I mean, if we can get the planners to talk to their staff, and then everybody's well informed.
But, you know,
In an ideal world,
is there
it's only 12.
is there a
municipalities.
is there a body?
We can send the superintendent to maybe to the
There
mayor.
used to be the League of Municipalities.
so there is, and then they have different divisions, different like councils
Yes.
and
Yeah.
things like that. But to Ms. Johnson Hustler's
Publicly
point,
volunteering, I'll go to any.
you know, people will go to their elected officials, and with a lot of our municipalities having local elections, say, in odd-numbered years, you'll have those towns very active in following this because the reassignment plan is going to follow their election
Right.
campaign. And then obviously, in even-numbered years, those are the other municipalities. So every year, you'll have, at least in some part of the county, some sort, people going to talk to elected officials. And I know one thing that was very valuable to me, you remember how many folks we had in last year's
Yes,
plan.
I do.
And how many individual council members came to lobby. And being able to have staff sit down with their town manager and really provide the town manager kind of a briefing so that he could talk to
It makes a huge
his
difference.
council members about this is, what we can do as the town,
That's right.
this is what we can't do as the town, but here's how we can provide feedback. That seemed to really help a lot of those other local officials really get an understanding of maybe what their role can be, where they can still provide feedback, but provide it in a constructive way, helpful way.
Is it
Yeah.
possible to then, because that's a lot of work, but is
Actually, they've
it,
already started to do it. I just want it to be systematic.
Yeah,
Right,
is- that's what I'm saying.
I mean, so that's the good news is they have a process. It's just, I think those of us who have needed it have used it, and I think it's just more beneficial if we make it systematic.
is it possible to even do, like, I don't know what your process is, even one-pagers? Like everything that you just said that they're going to ask? Is it a one-pager and can things go?
The website.
Can things go on the
She's got the website
No.
becomes our one pager that way.
Right, but I'm asking, is it possible to communicate with those planners who are going to go to, or constituents who are going to go to mayors, and would they be possibly willing to collaborate so that during that process time, link website so that everybody kind of like,
Well,
the county,
that's
that
what
the town can go to, that'll be on the town's website, a little link, a hyperlink for them during this season when they know it's happening that connects to your website.
And so that is something that, like, the staff did. They went to, like, I'll just pick on one of my towns, Morrisville. And so they were very active talking to the Morrisville town manager. We had Morrisville council members that had a lot of questions about the plan. So we could take the material that was available, and it was already on our website. We'd already created it, but the town didn't necessarily know it was there. And so by having staff meet with the manager, they could answer like more specific questions about the process that wasn't available on the website, but then they could direct all of their council members to the website, but then had the additional information, the benefit of meeting with staff. That kind of helped that, because sometimes you get process questions that when you're putting everything together on the website, it's a lot of information to digest. And if you start at the very beginning, some people may not get through all of it. Oftentimes they want to know, how does this affect me, and when does it affect me? So for some of those back-end questions, like, well, you're doing this to these schools, but what about these other schools we hear are going to be built, right? This was a big question, but it wasn't part of the materials this year, because we wanted to keep everybody focused on the changes that were made this year. Those kind of relationships, like you're talking about, like Ms. Johnson-Hostler's talking about, are really important to make, and I think we do a good job. I think the point is that if it's systematic, we're not fighting fires, but we're just giving everybody a hotline to call ahead of time.
That's great.
You know, I tell you, what I absolutely like about the process in terms of how we communicate, we know that transparency is going to be the friend, and as Ms. Johnson-Hostler said, today they're happy, but when it's them, it's going to be a problem. So I think everybody here has learned that the more we can be at the forefront and transparent, the better it's going to help us out. So thanks for what you got.
Are there any other questions, or Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler, did you have anything to add to that?
No, well done. I appreciate how far we've come.
All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you. See you in May.
All right, our next topic, we'll be talking about Restart and Restart programs. And so I see we have Area Superintendent James Overman here.
Yes, sir.
Will you be leading our presentation today?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I have a colleague, Dr. Mark Savage, will be joining us at the table as well.
Fantastic.
So thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you guys for entertaining us this afternoon. The last time that we were with you, we talked a little bit about Restart, continued authorization. We talked about Restart. And so today we want to talk with you about the results of our continued authorization process that we worked through. And we want to talk with you about the Restart applications that we would like to talk about for 24-25.
All right.
All right. So now I have the clicker. Then we'll get started. So as you are aware, Restart started some time ago, actually back in 2010. That's when they first started talking about Restart as a low-performing schools reform effort. And so in March of 2016, the State Board of Education approved a new policy specifically tied to the 2010 law that allowed us to exercise Restart within the district. And so at that particular time when they started Restart, the goals for the Restart model, as you can see, were to remove the barriers that may be interfering with the educational process. A lot of people call this like charter-like flexibility, so that's often how it's compared. And also, some of the other goals are to utilize flexibilities to address school and student needs, model innovative instructional practices, and then leverage flexibilities to increase student achievement. And so, as always, we like to make sure that when we're talking about goals, that things align with our strategic plan. And so, as you can see, our goals are to the left, or the Restart goals are to the left, and then we've just made a connection with the aims within the strategic plan in terms of how Restart supports them. So the first part that we'll start with today is the continued authorization process. So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about the process, and then I'll tell you the results of the 2 schools that we have within that process. So we refer to these schools as Cohort 1 schools. And so we'll talk more about those schools in a moment. But I want you to know that the purpose of the continued authorization process is for DPI to be able to determine if an LEA will continue to receive the authorization to operate the Restart model for those approved schools. And so schools go through this process every 5 years. So when you look at the numbers and when we started with Restart at Barwell Road and Walnut Creek, you say, oh, those numbers don't really add up. And that's because of COVID, of course, so we had some time off. So as a part of that process, there are 3 possible outcomes once you go through the continued authorization process by policy. You can either be granted to continue authorization, you can reapply in order to continue with Restart with those schools, or you could submit an application to exit altogether. And so those are the 3 options that you have by policy. I shared this graphic with you before. It's a little complex, but it just kind of gives you an idea of how DPI goes through the continued authorization workflow process. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can be granted authorization to continue. In our case, I am happy to report that our Cohort 1 schools achieved that status of continued authorization and meeting the academic gain needed for those 2 schools. So that means they have a benchmark. They level set when the schools start off with Restart, and then they look at how the school has performed over the 5-year period. And then if there's been an academic change within those schools over a certain percentage, then schools are granted that continued authorization. So today we're happy to report that Barwell Road and Walnut Creek both met that criteria and have been approved for continued authorization. So that's exciting. That's due to the hard work and everything that they've been doing within those 2 schools. So as a part of that process, before I go on, we just, in being granted that authorization process, then we want to continue to move forward with those 2 schools, particularly with Barwell and Walnut Creek. So now that brings us to the schools that are eligible for a Restart application for the 24-25 school year. So as you know, Restart in WCPSS, we focus on improving student achievement, right? So it is giving the schools charter-like flexibilities, but we want to be sure that whatever it is they're doing, they are working towards getting those schools out of low-performing status. And so our schools have worked really hard at that, and as they continue to grow and move out of low-performing status, we still have some schools that have been eligible or marked eligible for moving forward with Restart as well. So summary, you know that we have 198 schools, could be 197 depending on how we rank or categorize one of the schools. But we have 34 schools that are utilizing the Restart model this school year currently. And we have 10 additional schools that are eligible for Restart in the 24-25 school year. And so as a part of that process, as we normally do, we have to submit applications to DPI in order to get them approved by the state board. Some examples of school flexibilities include, but are not limited to, budget flexibility. We have schools that utilize lap salaries to provide additional supports, additional resources, sometimes tutoring to support students within those schools. They build collaborative structures so that their PLCs are able to meet on a weekly basis. And so a lot of the schools utilize that budget flexibility. We also have the access to use human resource flexibility, where some schools convert positions, including teacher assistant positions, which other schools are not given that same flexibility to do, to meet the needs of their staffing within the schools. And so those are 2 examples of flexibilities that are currently being utilized in our district today. So our task today, or what we're coming forward with today, is that we are interested in moving these 6 schools along, moving their applications along to be presented at the State Board of Education to become Restart schools for the 24-25 school year. And so I'll give you a moment to kind of review that list. You can tell what area they're in, which area superintendent works with those schools. And so as I stated before, our Restart schools are working really hard. This is some information that you've seen before in terms of the progress that a lot of our Restart schools are making over the different years. And so that's why we feel it's important that these 6 schools have the opportunity to move forward with the application process. So that process would include, as I've stated before, we would forward those applications to DPI, who would then get them on the docket for the State Board of Education. Once approved, we would be working with those schools this year for an implementation of 24-25, so that they're prepared for that implementation. So, all right, that was kind of fast, but that is the information that we have to share with you today, and we are open to any questions that you may have.
All right, questions from the board. Mr. Hershey?
So I'm going to ask this question based on a presentation we received about 45 minutes ago. I don't know the metrics we use to evaluate the impact of Helping Hands specifically. And we talked about one of the barriers being funding, and we have some flexibility in restart funding. I'm not suggesting we should. But when we evaluate a successful program like Helping Hands and we tie it to potential restart, do we examine that? Because he said a barrier was funding, and it wasn't significant funding, but it was funding. And I'm wondering if we, as Ms. Rice brought up, the point of how we're looking across different departments, if that type of program is considered as part of this.
So that's a great question. I think that we could definitely explore what that collaboration could look like. We do have Helping Hands in a lot of our Restart schools. In terms of that permanent partnership, I'm not sure that we've made that yet. But we've had other partnerships and things that we've done in Restart schools as well to help support the school culture, the student culture, and things of that nature. So I think that that's definitely something that we could further explore.
Mr. Hershey, we periodically meet with the Restart principals and bring them different resources and possibilities. So we certainly could hook up with Helping Hands to present maybe what they offer, price points, that sort of thing.
And again, I say that without knowing the metrics of how we evaluate each program.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just reminding them of some of the resources that we have here. We often look outside for resources, but that's a great resource to tap into inside.
Okay. So Ms. Edmonds?
Just a real technical question. So in the attachments, we only had the application for Southeast. Was that just to give us an example of what they look like? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, sure.
So in the past, we've generically created the applications. Schools address their specific flexibilities within their school improvement plans. And so once you're a Restart school, you have access to all of the flexibilities. So we just highlight in the application some of the structures and forms that we put in place.
Okay.
So great question.
When I was originally looking at these materials, and I was confused as to whether we were going for more than one.
Right.
But that makes sense.
Just
Thank
an
you.
example. Yep. Thank you for that question.
All right, thank you. Coming back around, Ms. Caulfield and Ms. Russ.
I just have a question in reference to the coaches. I know that we have had these conversations with the ELC coaches. How do they affect some of our restart statuses? Or do we have enough time that we've been able to see a difference where we may not have as many, that are, I hate that they have to fail in order to get this flexibility to succeed, right? So I'm just looking at it more proactively, if that's actually making an impact. Like Dr. Savage, you mentioned you bring them new resources all the time. Does that have a big impact for our Restart schools?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of our Restart schools are assigned ELCs. And we're even thinking some of those schools that are getting close to being Restart schools, we're looking at how we can assign ELCs to those schools as well to prevent that, or to get them out. If they've just dipped into low performing status, then let's try to provide that as a resource so that we have the opportunity to get them out of low performing status before they may be even titled Restart school or eligible for Restart.
Just ancillary information, Ms. Caulfield. So the ELC program began during the pandemic. So we don't have great, full data of implementation. We do have ancillary data, like when Ms. Hafner came and spoke last time, she had been assigned an ELC and now she's out. Hodge Road is now out. So we do believe that the ELCs do have an impact, and certainly we look at the data every year as far as how to best assign those folks. But I think we're probably another year out before we have really good sustainable data.
And I would like to add to that, even on your last presentation, of every school, the designated performing schools are the ones that are assigned an ELC, and every single one of those schools met growth. There was not one school that did not meet growth. And though we don't have the years to see a pattern, and we weren't all exceeding growth, of course, but it speaks volume, just like the Barwell and Walnut Creek. Both of those schools, they have those ELCs in place. And I think it makes a huge difference because it's that really prescriptive, intentional support that when area superintendents, when they have 20-plus schools, and we have some schools that are really, they need a high level of concentration on some of their supports and how to do some things from PLCs to learning walks, et cetera. We have seen that. We've seen the advantage and the benefit of it. And so it's always good to see when there's a designated low performance school and they meet or exceed growth, and that's exciting to us. That's what I would offer up as, beyond even the ancillary pieces of it, is that we do have that data from last year.
And we have, it's 34 restarts, right? So how many of those ELCs do we have? I know there's not one at every school. They rotate around, right? So
Yes.
how many do we have?
How many
ELCs?
We currently have 4 coaches, and we just received a position number to add a 5th one.
Okay, that's, okay.
And they do share multiple schools.
They share multiple schools, the current structure, and at some point I'm gonna bring the ELC model to you all without specifically giving schools, the school names, but they roughly have about 7 that are their primary schools. And then you have them on schools that are consult schools. And so that 7 just simply means we just want them to have a lot more attention and more one-on-one type of support. And then, again, those that are primary schools, those are the ones that could be a call, could be a Google Meet, it could be bi-weekly versus, or monthly versus every week and multiple times a week.
Yeah. I think it's great that we have the resources and are already seeing a difference and, along with the mentor, putting all that in together. That's great. Thank you.
Ms. Rice and then Dr. Ray.
I'm always excited about student achievement and growth. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. I do have just like 2 questions. One, how fast are we actually growing to actually get to proficient? Right? So growth is great, but are we proficient yet to show district-wide growth? Right? So that we all move together. So I'm curious about the growth where we're at, but when we talk about growth, what margins are we talking about to actually become proficient so that we can actually what's the word I'm looking for collectively, so that we can actually
Move our district academically.
yes, move the district, right? So while the restarts are great and that's a good thing, the question for me is, what are our rates of increment in growth, and how long will it take for the growth that we're seeing right now to get us to proficient?
And that's across the district, that's in what is the impact as we continue to grow incrementally?
Right.
What is that metric?
Right, and how long is that going to take? Because I have grandchildren in this district. So are we talking about, if we continue to do what we're doing right now, and will my granddaughter get to see that if she happens to be in a Southeast Raleigh high school or have to transition to a Southeast Raleigh elementary? Will she see it before she graduates 5th grade? Will she see it before she graduates high school? What does that look like? And let us be mindful of that particular area that we are going to say, oh, we see a little difference. And then how strategically are we being with the dollars and the programs and our coaches to get us to proficient to really celebrate growth, right? So that we can then take off. And so that's one question. And then the other question is, how are we handling the restart process for a school that has had such traumatic impact, and now we're getting ready to do something? Remember, we talked about change? Change is not easy. And yes, our children are resilient. unless our families can recover. But how are we getting ready to support these families with trauma that's happened already in their school, and then we get ready to turn right back around and give them another shock and awe. So I'm interested in how do I help with supporting our district, and what plans do we have in place? One, proficiency and growth to where it moves as a district, and two, how we affect their well-being with the process.
So I would say that the first part of proficiency and growth really does have to do with this board and the vision that you had in terms of the strategic plan and the aggressive nature of what's there. If you look at that plan and the expectations, it is not easy. And so that is the beginning part to me. I know that I want to say it was November, we did an exercise with principals that Stacey Wilson Norman led, and they actually went through and each school looked at their data to say, this is where you are. If you are going to have this level of proficiency, this is what you're going to have to do over this year, this year, and this year. So they clearly know what those numbers are. You know, in addition to that, it really is about equitably putting the resources where they need to be in order to do the work. And so I want you to think about what Chief Ellis just said in terms of the growth and proficiency that we see in those restart schools. So any low-performing school or school that struggles, there is an expectation, and we see that happening. The other thing that we've got to do as a district is to make sure we continue to look very close at schools that have high performance, but students that are not proficient, and they are masked within those averages. And so if we were to take all of those schools that are A and B schools and scoop out those students that are not proficient, those numbers are going to be just as large. And so it is about not only working with those low-performing schools or Title I schools or struggling schools, but also holding high-performing schools accountable to say, this is what we're going to look for when we go in. That's where a lot of the work of our area superintendents is working with principals to say, let's talk about how you're addressing those populations that are caught up in the averages. And so, and I'll end with this. One of the questions I pose to principals is that if you have a great teacher and there are 18 to 20 kids that are doing great, is it because of the teacher or is it because of the student ability? And do we know what kind of quality instruction that teacher is providing? So in other words, beginning teacher going into a high-performing school, that's the best place you want to be, because the kids are going to do well, but we still have to grow their pedagogy skills. Now, when it comes to the restart process, I'll yield to the group here because I know there's an expectation of how we choose restart schools, and we've been doing that here for a while, so I'll let whoever want to address that piece.
Sure. Yep. So in terms of how we prepare the schools and the families in being prepared for the restart status, the schools will go through, now that we will submit the applications, those identified schools will go through building an implementation timeline and an outline. That includes communication to parents, that includes communication to staff, and then it highlights the benefits of restart and the different resources and supports that's a part of that process. The other things that the principals will do is to work with their school improvement team, their leadership teams, to be sure that they've identified the supports and things that are needed for those schools as they move forward. So we have a pretty good track record in terms of the schools that have been identified and how they've implemented over the years. And so we feel good about the process and things that we have outlined to do.
And I do think it's important to note that it is really not a kind of whiplash jarring change for them. It's many of them are already Title I, and because when they are identified as Title I, we send family messages, et cetera, to them. And it is so tied to the school improvement planning process. It's very, very similar. The biggest difference is identifying it with your leadership team, making sure your school improvement team, they understand how that work is aligned to the restart and what they're expecting, or DPI is kind of evaluating or assessing how they're assessing those goals. But it will not, it will not be as traumatic as you would think, because it is really work that they're currently doing. It's just now looking at, we have Restart, and as Mr. Overman said, we celebrate it. Even though we hate that we are in the position to get it, we do get those flexibilities that these schools really benefit from. And so it can become a win, but we don't want as a district for that to be our win, which is why we were very selective. Even though 10 qualified, we chose 6 of them, because we still know that we are tasked with moving all those students, all those schools off of low performing.
Both of my kids' schools are Restart schools, and you can't tell the difference when you're a parent that your kid is in a Restart school. It is the same. What is provided is more supports for those students, more coaches, more maybe different class ratios, but they started out in a non-Restart school, and then when they transferred to their current elementary school, we couldn't tell the difference. So the changes for the students and for the families from my perspective, and I realize I'm just a single person and a single parent here, I didn't notice a difference until I learned more about what a Restart school was, and then I could visually see the supports. But it's the same curriculum and programming. It just has maybe some more personnel and boots on the ground to help kids.
And the opportunity to do things with Mr. Hirsch's question, the helping hands. It just allows us the funding and the supports to bring in different resources and programs.
Great. Thank you, Chief Ellis. Dr. Eng.
Dr. Taylor and I had a chance to go to Durant Road Elementary, and we actually had a very similar discussion, right? I mean, about how improving schools is not an overnight thing, and it does take time and effort and dedicated teachers, right? And we're talking about teacher retention, strategies for retaining the teachers, but also improving the teachers' pedagogical skills, right? And so, I mean, I think that it's great that this particular school is going to be able to harness that extra resources. So thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right. I know there's a lot to a Restart School program. You've been very efficient in presenting it. I really appreciate that. Is there any other questions that we have? We do have a long agenda, and I do want to be mindful of our time. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we'll turn to bell schedule recommendations. Again, this is not a policy debate about optimum bell schedules. Rather, this is what we are required to do by law in terms of establishing our bell schedules and tiers. And so, Mr. Schneidmiller, welcome. We'll let you get the presentation loaded up. I think board members in Assembly have a copy of the bell times as well. And step out for a quick minute. Vice Chair Johnson Hostler, do what she says to do.
As he leaves the person who has been waiting for bell schedule for 10-year change. But I will diligently do as the chair has asked me and try to run this as efficiently as possible. Mr. Schneidmiller.
Thank you. I saved you the pain of a presentation. I really think this is pretty short and sweet this year, and I can't believe it's that time of year already. But this afternoon, we do bring you our recommendations for the 2024-2025 school year bell schedules. As Mr. Haggerty led with this is required by policy. Policy 3300 requires that the bell schedules for the subsequent school year are set by April 1 of every year. As you know, we will open one new school in 24-25, and that's Woods Creek Elementary School. Staff is recommending the standard third-tier elementary schedule for Woods Creek, which is 9:15 to 3:45. And on top of that, staff proposes that all the other school schedules remain the same, with no changes from where we currently are in 23-24. One thing that I did want to mention is that in our small group sessions, it came up in several of those sessions that we might want to look at, and the board might be interested in looking at as we staff get further along in our bus route planning for the year over the summer. If we see where we could benefit from altering a bell schedule or changing a bell schedule by 10 or 15 minutes, that might be something that the board wants to entertain. So we can certainly start into that process and start our planning, setting the bell schedules as proposed now, and then staff would need to bring those recommended changes back to you with the understanding that there would be nothing more than a 10 to 15 minute change if that is something that the board is still aligned and wants to do. So with that being said, this is, again, just information today. Our plan would be to bring the bell schedules to you at your next meeting for approval on the 19th.
If only it were that easy, Mr. Steinmiller.
I was just going to say, I would be open to those potential changes, Mr. Steinmiller. That means that the buses will be more consistent and on time for our students. I appreciate that flexibility from your team, because we just stopped taking the bus in my house because it wasn't coming regularly or it wasn't coming on time. So having that ability to have that happen for our families, I think, is really helpful, especially for those that need to have that bus and don't have two parents that can go to two different carpools. So.
Mr. Hirsch.
Despite our chair's plea, I am just going to raise the point and put it out there, as I actually learned this from our vice chair. How much our bell schedule is going to get in the way of meeting our strategic plan? And we start very early, and we know what the science says, and we have a very, as we should, we have very high goals in our strategic plan. So I just put that out there to everybody.
I learned from, I didn't say those exact words, but yes. Mr. Swanson.
I agree with Mr. Hershey's point, but I think my biggest concern is making sure we have enough drivers to ensure that our kids are getting there, because that's essentially our goal, is to ensure that our kids are able to get to school. And if we don't have the drivers or the folks here, that's going to be a big problem. It also affects our strategic plan. So I guess I would love to see where we are with the transportation hiring. So therefore, we can adjust and plan much earlier than we did last year. So I know that was not quite on this agenda, but I just wanted to lift that point up since we were talking about this.
Tangentially related.
All right. I would say thank you, Mr. Swanson, but I didn't hear the beginning of it, so I'm not quite sure what it
What are we going to do about our
meant,
bus drivers? Do we have enough?
Okay, excellent, because that is one of the things that drives so many of these discussions.
That's right.
And I appreciate you bringing that in, because that's something we need to continue to talk about all year, and we definitely see the impact on it when we see the limits on what we can do with our schedules.
And I would really like to see a lot of the tiers go down to help it come out of tier 2 and tier 3 busing in certain districts, in certain areas, but not in others. I really would like to see
Yeah,
that
that's going to
happen
require
more.
a lot more drivers for that to happen. Yeah, yeah.
Even when we had 900, because when we were at our max, when I came on, we were a little over 800. We still had 3 tiers.
Yeah. Everybody
We
has
have-
tier 2.
But it shouldn't be condensed in one area. That's my check.
That's
Every
not-
single
Yeah.
school, everywhere has different tiers.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
What
to
we
your
can
point,
do-
we could look at it to Mr. Hershey's point was really using our equity strategic plan.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's what you're saying, but that was Mr. Hershey's
That's what
point from
I'm
our
saying.
conversation, is we should be using our strategic plan from our equity framework to look at what ways we can actually be more impactful to ensure that we can meet the outcomes of our strategic plan.
And one of the things that
I'm
we
not sure
can
if
look
that's what
at
you were saying.
as well, it ties into some of the work that Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler done was with reassignment, looking at the efficiency of those routes, right? And does the timing of the routes, is it impacted by how far we're taking those students, maybe beyond their neighborhoods? And so from an equity lens, there's another way that we can look to try to improve those times. But it is a lot of information, a lot of factors that go into it. And I want to get you all the information you need so you can look at it and really assess it.
Yeah, I've requested it. I've gotten something recently from Mr. Mark. It was very helpful and informative so that we can look at it and see it. But I also know what's happening on the ground with folks in the district, and so, yeah, I think moving forward, definitely, we just have to be extremely intentional about equity. We have to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Is there any more discussion or questions about the proposed bell schedule?
Not that you can fix today.
Probably not.
I think the high schoolers going to go to school later.
Yeah, and we'll hear a lot on both sides of that, and so that'll be
We agree.
a much bigger debate. I know.
I didn't know if I could say that today.
No, you can say that
Maybe
and get it
Samson
out.
will be a beneficiary of that.
Say it in
Go.
gold.
All right.
I'm just saying.
So, Mr. Steinmiller, I think this has gotten to the point where we can say thank you, and we'll pull up our next presentation. All
I think
right.
I'm back.
We're data-driven.
Thank you.
I think I'm next.
All right. So next, we're going to go to an item that's being brought in. It's an information item. Several members of the board have asked about our exceptional children's transportation contracts. Typically, these, you get a large number of contracts that come to you in our regular board meetings, and sometimes the contracts can be very complex. There's a lot of them, and so even though we're not involved in the vendor selection process, we wanted to make sure that here's an opportunity to let you see the contracts, ask any questions about the contracts, so that it's not just like one more item on a long list of contracts that we'd be reviewing. So, Mr. Schneidmiller?
Thank you. So again, we bring this item to you just as information and discussion today, really to share with you the progress that we're making in securing EC contracts or exceptional children contracts for the 24-25 school year. Just to build a little context around it, we are running 231 contracted routes today, transporting roughly 3,400 students. In addition to that, we have roughly 500 parent contracts where we pay our parents a $25 per day stipend to transport their child to school in lieu of our service through contract transportation. So in total, we've got roughly 3,900 students assigned to special transportation currently within the district. We feel we need roughly another 70 vehicles. Again, we're running 231 routes. We feel like we need another 70 vehicles under contract, basically to start to move in the direction of eliminating parent contracts and providing that service for our parents to support the continued growth of students assigned to this area, and also to reduce the number of students being served by each vehicle so that we can bring down ride times and provide better service. So again, our goal beginning in fiscal year 24-25 is to secure 300 vehicles under contract through the process that we're working currently. And to move in this direction, we offered 4 of our current vendors a contract already. This contract is very similar to the current contract that expires on June 30th of 24. We'll continue using, and I think you're familiar with the per vehicle per day rate structure of payment in these contracts. The contracts that we offered to 4 of our current vendors included a 10% increase in their per vehicle per day rate over what they're making today. And then it also includes a 4% escalation in fee or rate year over year through the 5-year contract. So that's different than today's contract. During this last 5-year contract, we've given them 3% per year. We know that inflation has hit, fairly hard in all areas of the economy, and so we felt in meeting with our finance folks and purchasing folks that the 10% increase plus the 4% year over year was a fair rate to offer within those contracts. So all 4 of those vendors have since signed their contract, and so we have those in hand, and we plan to bring these to you at your next meeting on March 19th for your consideration. And pending that board approval, we would have 240 of our targeted 300 vehicles under contract already. So, we're a large percentage toward our goal. But because we're not there, we plan to issue an RFP, hopefully very soon, to see if we can entertain and put under contract some new vendors to add at least 60 additional vehicles to help in this process. And so if we can secure those contracts, we would bring those to you hopefully by April 2nd. And we can bring those to your work session for presentation and discussion. So, and there's just the last little tidbit of information. These are expensive contracts. We all know this. The estimated cost of the contract for 24-25 will be, to run 300 vehicles under contract, would be roughly $21 million. So, to your point, Mr. Haggerty, these are significant contracts, so we appreciate the opportunity of bringing it to your work session for discussion and let you know where we're at right now.
Thank you, Mr. Snowmiller. Again, I know it's not typical, but we just thought in this situation we wanted that look. Ms. Edmonds?
Didn't one of these vendors very publicly resign during public comment last year?
Yes.
And that got resolved?
Yes. To be frank, the owner of the company rescinded his resignation. We've since worked with him. I think we've reconciled some of the differences. We offered him a contract. We actually offered him, one of his items of contention was that we had cut him back on the number of vehicles that he had under contract during this last 5-year period. So we offered him twice the number of vehicles in this new contract. So from 19 to what we offered him, 40 moving forward. And that was at his request during a meeting talking about, the structure of the contract, what would you like? And we were told 40, offered 40, and he since came back and said he feels more comfortable with 20. So we changed his offer to 20, and he signed that contract, and that's a contract we plan to move forward.
Well, thank you for sharing those details, but that was my flag when I reviewed this information yesterday, and I'm glad to hear that it got resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Yes, just as a reminder, this is difficult work, and it's not like we have a lot of companies beating down our doors to do this for the money that is available. So we're appreciative of all of our contract vendors, and I wish you luck in that RFP process. Mr. Swanson.
Right, well, thank you. I saw the contract, but I also understand that a verbal resignation doesn't mean anything to us in writing. So there's that. But my question that I wanted to raise is, for those that have been, with the district for quite some time, do they see a different pay scale in the contract versus some of those that were relatively new as we were trying to be competitive and bidding stuff out? And how does that align with our policy that we have going forward, like our equity policy? Does that also align when we're looking at contracts and whatnot?
That's a great question. So let me start by answering how we got to where we are with the rates that are in the contract. So, and Mr. Malone has been very involved in this process over the years with us. But if I just go back to this contract that's ending in June of '24, we went through the RFP process. And it was a really rigorous RFP process. And naturally, the vendors gave us a bid rate. We accepted every bid rate to the dollar to the penny that they bid and put them under contract for the number of vehicles that they wanted with the current vendors that we have, if that makes sense. So when we started this 5-year contract, it was a bid rate. And we said, okay, this is what you can provide the service for. You're giving us the number. We're not going to negotiate that. We're just going to put you under contract, and the board approved those, and we moved through the 5-year period. And so, as I mentioned with this, in an effort, good faith effort to continue working with these vendors and provide them the work, because they do a good job for us. And, I do want to say publicly that the vendor that came to the podium does a good job for us, and that was our interest in working with him to work through and resolve some of those problems. But, again, moving into this new contract, we thought that the offer that we made with the 10% increase and, the 4% escalation in the rate each year was fair. Obviously, they thought it was fair. They signed the contract. So I think we're in good standing moving forward.
Now, do these same rates, I'm sorry, I have just one quick follow-up.
No, please follow up.
So do these parents that are also getting contracts for the $25 a day, do they receive some type of 4% rate, or is that just for those that are contracted to drive?
So we haven't, that's a great question. We haven't made that decision for next year yet as to what that stipend rate would look like. If the board wants us to look at something as an increase to that, something similar to what we're providing our EC vendor, certainly something that we can look at doing.
And the only reason why I raised that was because if we don't necessarily have the personnel or the drivers to, again, get our kids to school, and our parents are able to, take on this extra burden, I just want to make sure that we're able to, number one, compensate them for the additional wear and tear that may arise on their vehicles, and also considering getting our kids education, getting them to and from school, because it means nothing if the doors are open but our kids are not sitting in the building. And I know firsthand as a former special education teacher that our special education students are our most vulnerable population, and our students do not deserve these major disruptions in their learning, because that's how we often see our students regress from the gains that they have made. So that's just something I want us to keep in mind. I understand you all are doing a great job, and it's difficult trying to get drivers and whatnot. So just being a little bit more intentional and thinking outside of our traditional boxes as we go about recruiting and retaining additional drivers. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Ms. Mahaffey.
Continuing on what our chair and Mr. Swanson said, these are not easy jobs, and just like we want to retain our bus drivers, because we know seeing that same face over and over again in the morning or when you leave is important. I think for our EC students, we can agree it's even more important. So I appreciate looking at this, approving the raise, looking at that 4% year over year. I think we've come a long way with our conversations with these drivers from when we got our spiral bound packet way back when. So thank you, and appreciate the continued work and understanding how vital they are to our school system as well. So.
Just say, I think we have one question, and then we'll finish with Ms. Johnson.
Sounds good.
Did you?
Oh, yes. I wanted to know, are our McKinley retail children included with this patch that we're seeing, because it's under special, specialized, exceptional children? Okay.
The way that we serve our McKinney benefit population, we first look to put them on a yellow bus if we can. But obviously, they need to be within their attendance area and along the current route to that school. So that's the first thing that we look at. If we can't accommodate them with a yellow bus, then we do accommodate them with special transportation service.
Thank you. It's a great question because it is a distinct program, but we do utilize the same vendors, so great clarification. And finally, Vice Chair Johnson.
And thank you for lifting up, because a lot of people don't realize that is an option for McKinney-Vento students. We were just at CELT this weekend talking about our McKinney-Vento students, and we talked about the stigma that all parents don't actually report their status of being unhoused, and so this is a great opportunity to uplift that. That is one of the affordabilities that we do have, that when I came on the board, I was not aware. Even if they move out of their district, we can still ensure they come to our school, so thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Steinmiller, mostly for what my question, I think you already answered from Mr. Swanson, was clearly in their contracts, the distinction of pay is distinctly different. And so I want to clarify that the initial was based on the RFP and the response, so that's how, and you or Mr. Muller can respond. The base pay was set then, and so all you're doing is keeping it what it was when we accepted them in the RFP and then given the same percentage of increase across the board. Is that accurate? Okay. And then the thing that I will bring up, back to our spiral bound notebook that we used to have. A little trouble there, PTSD. One of the things wasn't just cost, it was relational and treatment, which wasn't very different than what we hear from our bus drivers. And Mr. Steinmiller, you are not going to be surprised I'm bringing this up. But I guess that's my question. That's not something we can put in the contract, but it's more of the concerns about how people, the vendors, their drivers feel like they're treated. And again, like I said, it's verbatim what we hear from our bus drivers and safety assistants of feeling pretty much disenfranchised as members of our team who are providing a very needed service. So again, it's relational, right? Just respect of how we communicate with them, respectful relationships in, not even negotiated contracts, but negotiated when things are going wrong and feeling like they're a part of our team. And while they are indeed contract vendors, but I do want to bring up while we're talking about this, that I'm going to not make an assumption, but have you tell me, is that a part of the conversation as we move into this contract period ending and then we're extending for the next 5 years? Have we gone back and talked about some of those concerns around relationships?
Yeah, so, I mean, we are in constant contact. They are a part of us, our vendors, and we truly see it that way. There are guidelines for, how they go about their hiring in the contract, and we send, them like the same training materials and so on and so forth that we have. And we support, when we get complaints about, from a vendor about maybe, one of their drivers not feeling respected or, not feeling part of the family, we treat that situation the same as we would a yellow bus driver. And if that's answering your question, but, they are the vendor's employee. We have limited capabilities of what we can do.
And I do mean the vendors, I'm sorry, I don't actually mean their employees.
Their employees, okay.
I actually mean the actual vendor who is speaking to us on behalf of their employees.
I got you, okay.
But thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. So, but I think, just in my opinion, I think we have a good relationship as we met with our current vendors. They had high praise for the staff, our staff over that area, how responsive they are, how calming they are in tough situations, and how they're easy to work with. So, all I can say is my observation is, and my interactions with them is that, we're here to help support them as much as we are, all other aspects of transportation.
All right, thank you. Are there any final questions on this topic? All right, thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, our last item on our work session agenda tonight is the board resolution on safer gun storage. Now, this was something that I know several board members have been interested in, have been discussing this for some time. Every time there's an incident that we see in our schools, it just elevates this issue. And I know we've heard from many advocates on this topic as well. We have Kendrick Scott here as our Senior Director of Security, and Lisa Luton, our Chief Communications Officer. And I want them to be a part of this discussion because, anytime we don't get a lot of resolutions. You'll know that we don't do this very lightly. And oftentimes, as advocates reach out to us, they'll provide us a lot of information that puts the issue framed in their words. And then as a school district and as a staff, we want to make sure that everything we put out is researched, fact-checked. And so I know that in putting this language together that Ms. Luton drafted, this was something that you looked at many different resources to come together, the Be Smart campaign, the NC Safe campaign, local law enforcement. And so what I'd like to do, if you're amenable to it, is just walk us through the draft and let us know, how this language came up, where this language came from. I know several board members have expressed questions or some potential edits and changes, and we'll go through those maybe section by section, but first I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about how we got to this starting point.
Perfect, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. So Mr. Scott and myself are here to facilitate this board resolution on safer gun storage. As Chair Hagerty said, we bring this at your request to facilitate awareness of the community's role in keeping our schools safe. specifically related to their obligation to keep their guns stored safely. This is a well-documented increase that we see on the number of guns in our schools. It's a nationwide epidemic. You all know as well as I do that our community is not immune to the problem that the rest of the nation is seeing. As a public safety measure, our district will launch a public awareness campaign on gun safety this month. This resolution is the first step in that process. We can talk about what will follow that afterwards. As Chair Haggerty mentioned, this draft was pulled primarily from the nonprofit organization Every Town for Gun Safety. We did a little bit of work on it, as Chair Haggerty mentioned. You all have had some discussion. I will say that I'm excited about your discussion. This is a public safety campaign. So in your discussion about the facts and about this resolution, you all have increased your own education and your own knowledge on this problem. And so part of this conversation I'm proud to facilitate because it will also help further increase the knowledge of our entire community. So with that, I will walk through the resolution. We will make edits on the resolution and then come back and bring you the final copy. The plan, assuming that we can make some progress today, is to bring it back for board approval at your next board meeting. We will be joined there by law enforcement, by other elected officials to help promote this information and to make sure that the entire community is aware of how important this is. I am here to facilitate the public awareness campaign. Mr. Scott is here because he leads our safety efforts in making sure that our schools are safe. So with that, I'll go through line by line and we can talk through it.
Please, thank you.
Perfect. All right. So the resolution reads, whereas evidence strongly suggests that secure firearm storage is an essential component to any effective strategy to keep schools and students safe. Shall I pause and see if there are any upgrades, as we like to say?
Any questions about that language? All right, continuing on.
Great. Whereas an estimated 4.6 million American children live in households possessing at least one firearm.
Ms. Caulfield, I believe, had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. I know that it was also brought up about how many children in general, which was a very large number.
Mm-hmm,
I think just hearing those statistics really raises a lot of awareness. So I understand the lock and unloaded portion of it, although I have like 3 copies printed out, so I hope I'm on the most current one. The one from that site said that there was 13 million that have. I was just wondering if that was something that we can consider putting in, because I think it does make a statement.
So the proposed language, I believe, is whereas an estimated 13 million American children live in households possessing at least one firearm, and 4.6 of those live in a household with at least one loaded and unlocked firearm.
Okay, was that updated?
No, I think that's the proposal that I have heard circulated. I assume,
is that the one that you sent, Lynn? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Okay. Because in Sibley, it still says the other one, so that's what I was looking at. Okay,
Yeah.
so it does have the...
No, I did not make any drafts to the version in Assembly because that one had already been circulated, but I have my notes that you all have shared with me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And if I may, Chair Haggerty, for the public that's following along, I did talk extensively with the Be Smart representative, the same one that came and gave a program for us last year. And that was it's a distinction between the 4.6 million and the 13 million. And I asked for sources. And so I did email everybody a draft, and I believe that those 2 numbers is actually from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Anyway, because I felt like we should, however we proceed, whatever the final is, that we should reference where these numbers come from.
Yep.
So.
I agree.
So
That was it. So, yeah.
Do you have alignment on that revised language?
It's a little tricky because some of our members have stepped out.
Oh, yeah.
But from the folks around the table. What do you all think about that?
Yes. Yes?
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, seems like then with the folks here that we have some general agreement, so we'll make that change.
Great. All right. The next one is whereas every year an average of 350 children under the age of 18 unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else. That's nearly one unintentional shooting per day, and 70% of those incidents take place inside a home. Any upgrades to that language? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Whereas another 1,200 children and teens die by gun suicide each year, most often using guns belonging to family members.
So go ahead.
No, well, I saw both of you.
That's okay, she could go
That
first,
works.
she might answer my question.
Okay, Ms. Edmonds then?
So there's a 1,200 versus 700, and the 700 number comes from the CDC, and I don't have a problem with the 1,200 number, I just don't have a reference for where that comes from.
Yeah. It doesn't, so my colleague Harrison Light, who did the draft, has spent some time researching it. It looks like there are a lot of primary sources that provide different numbers depending on how they're measuring it. What's striking to me is that whatever the number it is, it's too high.
Of course.
And so where is it that you all want to land?
I'm fine with 1,200, I don't have a citation for that. So that would be my only request, is if we keep 1,200, I'd like to have a citation.
Okay, I can share the citation. I think it's the same citation that we were shared. It's a different way of measuring it.
Okay.
So.
Okay, can we just have that link added?
The citation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any further comment on that one? All right, we'll continue.
Whereas in incidents of gun violence on school grounds, the large majority of active shooters were current students or recent graduates.
We're good with that one?
In addition, I'd like for us to consider, it goes on to say, and up to 80% of shooters under the age of 18 obtain their guns from their own home, a relative's home, or from friends.
Yeah. And I saw the citation for that, which is useful, and we can include that.
That's
an
the
upgrade.
National Threat Assessment Center, I believe. So.
I think it's important to say that because I do feel that a lot of parents do not understand the source of this, and they all, I'm not saying they all, I think a common misconception is I have it, safe, and it's not going to happen in my home, or my children may not even know that I have a gun and this is where it is. So when they see that statistic, it might just make everybody just take a minute, pause, and digest that information, and then hopefully go check their home.
What I also like about it is the reference to friends where, if I have guns in my home and I feel like I've taught my children how to be in a home with guns responsibly, but a child comes to my house and I've not secured those weapons, that child may have no education or reference point whatsoever, and they could get access if the guns are not secured.
And that was one of those steps for the Be Smart campaign, was to
ask.
Right.
That's the A, I think, in the,
And I know this is a resolution about the gun safety, but just to add to what Ms. Edmonds was saying, there are some times that parents can go through all these steps and they don't realize the mental health struggles that the children are going through. So putting those numbers together, this is just, statistics for the actual guns, but not adding to the fact that your children may have mental health, and they may be safely trained, they may know the combination, and it may be put away, but to have those two maybe go together, I'm not sure how we would link that on the resolution, but just to understand that there is just because you have it locked, the diligence doesn't stop there.
I will add as a point of privilege that, to your point, Ms. Caulfield, after we have these instances in our school, Mr. Scott and I often debrief, and one of the common themes that I learn is that in debriefing with parents, they often share what you just shared, that they did not expect that their child would do this until their child does do that. And they did not expect that their child knew where the gun was or had access to guns until their child does have access and brings them to a school building.
All right, thank you.
The next line states, whereas research shows that secure firearm storage practices are associated with up to a 32% reduction in the risk of self-inflicted and unintentional firearm deaths among children and teens.
And I'd like to consider another addition, because we're not just concerned about deaths, but we're also concerned about injuries, that it continues to say, and an 85% reduction in the risk of unintentional injuries among children and teens.
Do we have support for that?
I like that. And we have a reference on it.
The next statement, whereas the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center recommends the importance of appropriate storage of firearms, supported by a finding that 70% of school shooters used firearms acquired from the homes of parents or close relatives.
This I was just confused by, because I saw 78% in an email, 76% on here, and then 70% on the original draft and assembly. So I would just say, yeah, just pick our
Say over
source.
70%.
Right.
Yeah, if we have over
70%.
70% and then multiple sources, they can,
That's totally fine. Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think we can all agree that over 70% is 1% too many.
Yes, yes.
Whereas across the country, lawmakers, community members, and local leaders are working together to implement public awareness campaigns, such as the North Carolina Secure All Firearms Effectively program, which is endorsed by the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, and which encourages secure gun storage practices and highlights the public safety risk of unsecured guns.
Yes, I would like for us to consider Be Smart, the organization Be Smart being included here. We brought them before us to present to our full board. They're coming to our BACs, most of them they've already been to. So I know Superintendent Moore put it along with you after an incident last year in some of our district-wide communication. So I don't think it's an organization we need to shy away from. So I would like to see them included in that section.
They also have a very handy, their website, I think is very user-friendly, and I think it's very good for families, quick, to the point, and I think it's good for our families to use that website.
so another thought on that, however, is that, we are making this statement and we're trying to do this in partnership with members of a coalition that are in the NC SAFE program who may not be part of that other organization. So I think we've got valuable resources from groups like Be Smart. And I think we need to have some place where we're making those resources available. But if we're trying to get everyone, like with the sheriff's offices, local PDs and others, in support of the same resolution, I know we'd like to lift everybody up, but I do want to give priority to the coalition that our partners are in. Ms. Mahaffey?
I'm going to go with a both and on this, and to say, after it says the NC SAFE program and the explanation of the endorsement from the Department of Public Safety, to after the and Be Smart, and then both of which encourage secure gun storage practices and highlight the public safety risk of unsecured guns. I think by adding that, you have both the partnership with law enforcement, but also a resource that parents and PTAs can more readily access, available in that already long sentence.
So, Ms. Mahaffey, if I can take what you said and maybe offer an alternative that I think gets to the spirit of what you said, if we could maybe just break it into two, because it is so very long. Some other board members had mentioned the length of that one. and lift up what you just said in the explanation, that it really is a great resource to parents and PTAs. But so we're dividing up the campaign that the lawmakers and law enforcement, belong to, and then another whereas about the resources that are available to parents, PTAs, and community members. I think we can accomplish your both and maybe it's even more effective, by holding it up separately rather than burying it in like one really long one.
What if you
I don't
added to
think
the
so.
following
I think it's
paragraph?
fine as one big long one.
Okay.
Me too.
Well,
Or we could
let's
add
talk
it,
about
the
it.
following statement talks about school districts across the country has been sending materials to parents and guardians. We could put the Be Smart piece in there.
Okay, so we have a division of thought here. Do we have any other discussion on it? What folks would like to do, Ms.
I just wanted to support what you just said, because what I heard you say is it takes the NCP, or National Parent Teacher NCPTA, or National PTA, and the Pediatric Society, it takes them off the hook of claiming, we're not saying that they endorse Be Smart. That's what I heard you saying.
Correct.
The way that you reworded it, so I support that.
Dr. Ng?
I like the idea of breaking it out, Be Smart to be broken out from that particular paragraph, just so that it actually enhances their advocacy role, that in fact, you can have prominent links to link out to their information, so that, it's not just a declaration, but it's actually something that people can actually use. So, and that, I'm not quite sure where to put that, if we break it out though.
Mr. Swanson?
I think that's what Ms. Caulfield was suggesting too, is breaking out that part. And I'm definitely in favor of what both of you all have said with that piece. So yes, I just want to lift up what Ms. Caulfield had said.
I might have missed that part.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do, actually, with separating the whereas and highlighting Be Smart as separate, and then we don't have to worry about the endorsed piece.
Mr. Hershey, do you have an opinion?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Ms. Grace Conley.
So if we break it out, Ms. Maffey, can we make
I'm
sure that
good.
it has the language in it that you had lifted up? Okay, great. Thank you.
The second, or the next statement, whereas school districts across the country have begun to proactively send materials home to parents and guardians, informing them of applicable firearm storage laws and firearm secure storage best practices.
Any comments on this? All right, we'll continue.
Whereas keeping students, teachers, and staff safe from the threat of gun violence should be the responsibility of all adult stakeholders at each of our school sites.
I mean, I would even go even further, but I like the language, I like the language there. I don't have a change for it. I just, when we talk about like safe storage, it's also safe storage at home, right, beyond the school site, but I don't have a recommendation for you.
Whereas state law imposes penalties on adults when a child gains unauthorized access to an improperly stored firearm.
Any comment?
Is there, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is there a potential link to that?
It's there.
Is there?
Yeah, there's a hyperlink on it, at least on mine. I don't know.
Mine too.
Ms. Rice?
Can we, I'm sorry, I agree with you on that previous statement about, we can't, even if language, we can't just use the short conjunction of and homes, whatever, because in lieu of what we've experienced in our own county and district, and this situation of homes and students and safety, I really think that home should be added in there in some way, not just schools. It's not just, we put a lot of weight on school only, but it needs to be at home too.
Well, and to your point, I'll see it sometimes when we have cases that are brought to us that involve a student, and maybe there is a gun present or actual gun violence and an injury involved. It might be off-site, where students either on their way to school or leaving school have become involved in some sort of like altercation. Ms. Mahaffey and Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
I was going to say, at each of our school sites and throughout our community, would that be acceptable?
I think so, because it expands. I think that's safe. I think that's good.
Can we just throw in the word keeping students, families, and teachers, because we want to include our families, if we're going to say, acknowledge our families and their role in that.
Okay, so I heard add families, and I heard the language about communities. Ms. Johnson-Hostler, did you have more to add?
No, I mean, I clearly am a fan of a run-on sentence, but I do echo the same. I mean, everybody knows it. But I do appreciate the addition of not isolating schools. I mean, the whole point of the work that we've done, as Ms. Caulfield has said, of most of us this year being consistent and inviting them to our BAC is really to try to bridge the gap, to be very clear that we want to say that this really is our community. I think the feedback you just gave is good.
I'm going to uplift a suggestion from our attorney that if you remove the at each of our school sites, you are now inclusive of everybody's comments.
That's why we pay you.
Well, I think it reads better. And I don't want it to look like it's your responsibility too at the school.
Exactly.
Level. It's not, so.
Mr. Swanson, did you have a comment?
I was going to say yes, that just shows this is a community issue, community problem that involves all of us at the table, not just the school system, but our partners, our law enforcement agencies. Everyone has a stake in this fight, and so I think we just need to make sure that we're lifting that up and being mindful of that.
Great. I appreciate everyone's feedback on that one. All right, Ms. Luke?
Be it therefore resolved that the board directs the superintendent and staff to provide families with information resources about the importance of secure gun storage, the legal consequences to parents and guardians when a child gains unauthorized access to an improperly stored firearm, and best practices for secure gun storage as reviewed by local law enforcement partners.
All right. The resolution clause is always supposed to be your biggest one. It's your call to action. Ms. Mahaffey, did you have a comment?
I was just curious, with information resources, is that meant to be an and?
Right.
Right. Well, and it can be awkward, right? Because if it's informational resources, I mean, aren't resources informational anyway? Is it redundant? Does it flow well?
I'm just curious about.
It's not just information, it's also
Right.
where to seek help.
Resources, right.
So I think it's an and.
Mr. Swanson?
And if this is our call to action, it just can't be a one-time thing. And I think that we need to be very important and mindful of that this needs to be an ongoing conversation, not just we pass a resolution, we've done our thing. This needs to be throughout the entire school year, not just beyond this school year, but hopefully, maybe that requires we pass this resolution every school year, but I just don't want this resolution to get passed, and then we felt like this a great hurrah, and nothing else happens. So I just want to say I want to see some consistency with this. That's my last point.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Ms. Mahaffey?
I would wonder if it would be better if we add somewhere like the ongoing information, or direct the longevity of that, because I do know there are several times, because we get caught up in a cycle where we've had resolutions that we've had to go back and redo because we forgot that it was the month that we were supposed to do the resolution for that. So I think if we put our intent in the resolved paragraph, I think that will be much stronger than the next board trying to remember, oh, it's that time again.
So let me
or maybe both and.
So let me point out to some language and see if any of this is what you're getting at. The board directs the superintendent and staff, and it says to provide families. Would you want like a temporal qualifier in there, like to regularly provide, to annually qualify?
Yeah.
Consistently provide?
Update it.
So what does that mean? 'Cause I think when someone says annually or the language that you lifted up, everyone's different, has different interpretations. And so, again, I want to be consistent. I think that's the word of this board is being consistent. So does that mean that's quarterly? Is it, something that we can at least hold ourselves accountable to? Versus just, again, that one-time, one-year project.
So, you can reflect that in your resolution, or you can give us an understanding or directive that we'd like to see updates at a periodic time regarding this resolution to the board. I think either one of those will work if you reflect it or just let us know this is what you want.
Mr. Swanson, I'll put it back to you, and then, Ms. Rice, did you have a comment?
So what does monthly look like? We have we meet twice a month. So we reserve one of those months that we give updates, provide folks with information. I would be okay with that. I just think yearly or maybe bi-monthly would be, I just don't want us to pass this and something happens and then we are forced to look back at this resolution. I want it to be a continuous thing.
Well, and I think this is a good discussion, right? Because some people could be looking at this and ask, why are we even passing a resolution? Why are schools getting involved in this debate? But we've seen it so many times, right? Throughout the year, we'll have a situation of a child that'll bring a gun to a school event, an after-school event, school property, and where did they get the gun in the first place? And I think of an incident just a year ago in my side of town where an elementary school child brought a loaded weapon to campus, and when the parent was contacted, the response was, oh yeah, that was for show and tell, right? So we think this is common sense, and we think that even if we do this annually, surely we'll catch everyone. But to Mr. Swanson's point, if we're not diligent, where does this fall through the cracks? So,
if I may offer a suggestion, as part of one of our action steps in the strategic plan for family and community engagement, there's an action step that will create a deliverable that is a calendar of family and community engagement topics. And so as part of our communication plan, we have a plan to include this in there multiple times a year. However, the number really has to do with what that whole calendar looks like. Here's the tragic strategy is that, unfortunately, we have lots of high public opportunities throughout the year in which we are doing media interviews about this topic because a child brought a gun to school. And so each one of those, unfortunately, gives us the opportunity to bring this message to the forefront. Both are effective strategies, the newsletter and the PTA meetings and the reminder on television that this could have been preventable, and here are the ways that we can prevent this.
So can we mention using our new community engagement, efforts in this, just mention in this resolution somehow?
Or even just putting in what Tyler just said, families with bi-monthly information resources.
So I think there's there's a common agreement that we want to state that we're doing this on an ongoing basis. And so then the question is, like Mr. Swanson said, bi-monthly as a suggestion. Ms. Luton suggests a lot of different channels that could take place, and there's nothing to say that we couldn't do it more frequently than bi-monthly. So, Mr. Rice, are you suggesting like maybe we use bi-monthly as sort of like the floor, and then, of course, if we do more than that, maybe it's at least bi-monthly or whatever you think is realistic?
Right. I think we have to have some level of measure. Can we want to be able to reflect it in our records as our measurable goal that we're at least doing it bi-monthly, and then incorporating it with all of our areas of community engagement, and just that after a while it just be a part of our culture.
I think so. Ms. Evans, did you have a comment? Okay. So, Mr. Swanson and Ms. Mahaffey, I heard you speak on this one. Do you think that addresses it, or do you have more specific language?
I'm fine with that.
Same. And will somebody repeat the proposed edit for me?
Ms. Rice, I think you had.
You said, so basically, be it therefore resolved that the board directs the superintendent and staff to provide families with bi-monthly information resources about the importance, ...
Just being the lawyer, I just might make sure on the bi-monthly, every other month, or twice a month?
Every other month, not semi-monthly.
Maybe we
That's
say
what I heard.
quarterly, and that way
That gives a little
every.
Yeah, it's never clear in the world what bi-monthly means.
I totally agree.
It'll go back and forth, if it's twice a month or every other month.
The semi-annual sale.
As long as it's measurable, I think, because, but we have to look at it, if you're going to say quarterly, we're basically saying we're only going to talk about this 4 times a year. That's basically what we just said. So let's look at, again, measure. Are we going to say monthly? Because if we're going to measure it, we're simply saying we're only going to talk about gun safety out loud 4 times a year.
I took it as at least.
Yeah.
But we need to enter then at least, because we said provide.
No.
Because if we put the language provide quarterly.
Is fine.
I said, this is when you're sending something.
Because we talk about, how many times have we spoken about this? Just recently, we talked about it in our legislative agenda. We're talking about it now. We've had Be Smart come. So we do it more than just quarterly, but I think we have a commitment to do it at least, quarterly. But I think that's a measurable goal rather than saying I don't want to say overcommitting, because that sounds like I don't care about it, but I think that then it's a way to say we're doing it. And maybe we come and bring this back next year and say, every other month is more appropriate.
So Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, so I do want to ask a clarifying question. So with the change, bi-monthly, quarterly, whatever the case may be, we're talking about how we provide information to parents or how we provide information to the board about our efforts. I want to make sure that we're not confused about what we're talking about.
That's a big difference.
So my interpretation was pushing it out to the parents and community.
Yes, that's how I hear it.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other? Ms. Coffin, did you have?
No, I'm just going back and forth because I'm just an advocate for the more you put it in front of these kids and these families, the more it's repeated over and over again. And then they're not even thinking about it. They're not looking at it. It's just something they're constantly hearing and being repeated in front of them. It becomes like second nature and a known fact. Where if somebody's seeking it out or only looking at it once in a blue moon, they may walk right past it and they miss that opportunity. And maybe for that child, it's 6 months. Maybe it's, 3, quarters that have gone by. So I don't know. I tend to feel like the more the better.
I know.
When it comes to something like that.
It's tricky, right? Because I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of valid opinions. I know that, one argument is that if you are putting it out constantly, why not weekly, why not daily? Well, then you desensitize people to it. And it eventually just kind of blends in with all the other stuff. Whereas if it's sort of like held out and something a little bit different than the norm, then maybe you pay more attention to it. But to your point, you don't want to lose it, right? You don't want to have a tragedy because someone just sort of fell in the gap. So I see it both ways.
I do, and I hear us about the quarterly, but again, I'm going to point out very directly. We're saying we're going to talk about this 4 times a year. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because when district is looking at this and they're looking at directives, they're going to do what's written because they're going to follow the direction of what's written. And while we may have support around that, we will talk about it more often than a quarter. Let's be mindful of the people who have multiple responsibilities to disseminate other types of information consistently, that in their mind and when they're setting their goals, their stuff is saying, okay, we have to do this every quarter, and then that's what they're going to do. But when in fact we're sitting at the table saying we want it to really be said more, so let's just say what we really mean. And I'm a little passionate about this because the incident that hit our city, my children lived in that neighborhood. My grandchildren live there. So it needs to be said more than 4 times a year. And so that's very personal to me, and I don't have a problem with saying that. because that's my family that could not be here, that was around the corner. So it means more to me than 4 times a year that we say it, and I don't think it'll be desensitized because it's a major issue in our country. The fact that we even writing a resolution about it when we could have wrote a resolution about a whole lot of other things. But if this is this important, then make it important. And it's not something, and I'm being realistic about staff and being supportive with staff, and we're being realistic. We can continue to talk about it, but let's be honest about what staff can do and what they're able to do with all the other things that they're going to do and share. They're going to put it on their list and say, we're going to make sure we meet this goal. And the goal is quarterly, which simply says 4 out of 12 times a year, we're going to make sure folks get information. And as we stated, it's going to be disseminated to families. That's not us as a board talking about it. We're talking about how often are we going to share this with families according to what our resolution is saying. We're not talking about our conversations. We can talk about it as much as we want, but when we're going to give superintendent and staff directives, we literally are just saying to them, let's talk about it. You send something out 4 times. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to be so direct, but that matters to me. And I don't know, and if it matters to the rest of us that we put in this resolution, I think we should do it more than 4 times a year.
And if I could add to that, the desensitization part, it could also come to a matter of us being creative in how we deliver the message. So we don't, like this resolution doesn't mean we need to repeat this resolution and hand this out 4 times a year. You know, 1 month could be the poster, another month could be an event that we're trying to plan, another one, you know, so every month it could be something different that is put out there that is just and that's just a matter of creating it, and each year it could be repeated, so it's not an ongoing burden on the staff, but it's still for each family that enters that grade, it's a new thing for them to see.
We'll hear from Mr. Hirsch and then we'll get Ms. Mahaffey.
Lisa, do you have any sense of how many times you've sent out gun safety information over the last year?
Too many, but I don't have an
is it
exact
like?
number.
It's like 15 times.
I would, knowing that there are a lot of media partners who are closely listening to that number, I'd like to make sure it's accurate and share it back.
Could you just kind of get that for us and let us know? Because I think that will help, that might help us, give us a good direction, because we'll know exactly what is actually going on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was going to, Ms. Mahaffey had a question. I see Mr. Swanson wants to comment on this.
Yes, but I guess if we're going to raise that, then we need to look at it from 2 folds. Was it preventative or was it reactionary? And if it was reactionary, then that's another question or another problem we need to look at. But if it was preventative, then that's going to help guide our conversation. So that's just a piece I wanted to.
Ms. Mahaffey, did you have a?
No.
All right. Vice Chair Johnson-Hosler.
Yeah, I actually just have a question that I don't expect you to have an answer to today, and I'm just, again, Ms. Caulfield will be over me saying this, but almost everything we come up with, we treat it like it's something we have to create, and that's just not the case. All of these are public health issues that have very clear design products that we can be utilizing and sharing with our schools. My recommendation is that we not suffer a large conversation about how frequently we do this. My question is, can we actually give staff timing to say, here are some evidence-based products that exist that we can implement at our schools, and here is the sequence, because these curricula come with sequences and telling you how often do you post the poster, where do you post it, what's the messaging, does it go in a principal announcement? Like, I just think that we can wordsmith this and come up with timelines all we want. It's just a better use of time to look at products that exist that are evidence-based that you can bring back to us and say, here's the best way to implement this. Because truthfully, I think the real thing that's consistent at this table is we all agree that we're at a place that we can't ignore this, and it is clearly, again, it's a public health crisis. Wake County isn't the only people expressing this interest, and I just think it's beneficial when we can say, here is information that's already been put together that's based in evidence that we can share, so that it's, 1, consistent across the district, 2, it doesn't get desensitized because the research has been shown and for specific age groups of what really works. And then we give some instruction around how you do that. Like this information goes in a PTA newsletter. This information is released from the principal every other month in his newsletter or her newsletter. So I just think that for me, it's a better use if we are asking people to do the same thing that yields real results, to Ms. Caulfield's point of making sure we're keeping it front and center.
So to that point, Sarah and Harrison have met with all of our local law enforcement agency partners. You all know that we have been meeting regularly with the Department of Justice and the Governor's Office, who have already invested in gathering these resources and have their own toolkit. We are not experts in gun safety. We are experts in education.
Exactly.
So we have one expert in gun safety. So we fully intend to borrow and take from our partners in this. I also want to share that in the strategic plan that you all have adopted and directed, there are other safety initiatives that will come out this year. A revamp of the See Something, Say Something. You all have already met about the rave. There are lots of different things that we will be doing this year to enhance school safety, and all of that will be part of our regular messaging. I don't have the strat plan in front of me, but I do believe that it directs regular messaging regarding school safety, and that is our intent to do. Regular meaning, I'm not going to put Sarah on the spot, but I think right now we have a goal of once a month to put out safety messaging.
Okay, so in respect of the time, and I want to have adequate consideration of Ms. Johnson-Hostler's request. How would we feel about if everyone is fine with all of the whereas clauses as we've gone through them? If we can agree in principle on those whereas clauses, and then Ms. Luton, if you could work with Mr. Scott, and then maybe come back to us at the next work session with either one or multiple options for that last clause. We'll take one last look at it at our work session 2 weeks from now before bringing it to action at that same board meeting. And then if individual board members have specific feedback you'd like to provide Mr. Scott and Ms. Luton, if you want to do that between now and the next meeting, we could do that. Again, just send it to them directly. Don't send it to everybody so it's not like a virtual meeting. But if you could do that, I will trust the two of you to put together some language that we can look at, make sure we feel comfortable. I think you've heard from everyone around the table, but I think to Ms. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler's point, we'll entrust you to wordsmith it and show us what that looks like, but then we'll have one final look before we bring it before the board. Is everyone comfortable with that? All right. Well, in that case, I will declare the work session closed, and we'll transition to our full board meeting.